Good morning, members and colleagues. I would like to assist the person who just joined now as Zoom user to rename him or herself. Can he please open his microphone and indicate his name, please? Failing which, we'll have to remove the account Zoom user.
Good morning. My name is Honorable Bui Klaba from Gauteng Provincial Legislature. Thank you.
Okay, Honorable Kawa, let me rename you now.
A very good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Mr. Nodada Estelle.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, Chairperson. How are you, Chair?
Good morning, Chairperson.
All is well, Mr. Nodada. Morning, Estelle, and good morning to all the colleagues. We'll start at exactly 9 o'clock.
Good
Thank you,
morning.
Chair.
I think we still got time for breakfast now before 9 o'clock. Yes, thank you.
You can have your breakfast, Honorable Swart, but by 9
Oh.
o'clock, you must be on the platform.
I'll do so. Where's the nuts and all the biltong pieces this morning?
Mr. Nodada and Estelle are better placed. You can respond to that.
Morning, colleagues and honorable members on the platform. I would like to assist the colleague or honorable member who has joined using 010S15 account to rename him or herself. Can you please introduce him or herself so that we can rename him or her? Account is 010S15. Kindly introduce yourself so that we can assist with renaming your gadget from this side. Honorable members and colleagues, unfortunately, if we don't
let's
receive
wait
a
for-
response, we'll have to remove. Chairperson?
Let's just kindly write on the chat directly to whoever that's.
Yeah,
Zero
Chair.
one coming.
Kindly write a message for that particular person on the chat group before removing them. You may find that some of them went to grab their coffee before 9 o'clock because I said the meeting will start at 9. Or I'll give you an opportunity to check up on them at 9 o'clock. Probably everybody will be on the platform. A very good morning, colleagues. Mr. Nodada and Estelle, do we have enough members to can proceed with our meeting?
Can I please have a few seconds? I just want to filter all members and check, then I will be back shortly, Chairperson. Just a few seconds.
No problem, Mr. Nodada.
Recording in progress.
In the meantime, it's 9 o'clock on the dot. A colleague of ours whose gadget is renamed 010S15, kindly introduce yourself, or if possible, kindly rename your gadget, because the Secretariat will in no time remove you from the platform. Either indicate or just open your mic, introduce yourself so that your gadget can be accordingly renamed.
Good afternoon, honorable members. My name is Portia Masarumule from the GPAA.
Thank you very much. Or kindly just write your name on the chat group for easy access by the Secretariat to can assist you in renaming your gadget. Thank you very much, and thanks for that.
Chairperson.
Yes, Mr. Nodada.
Thank you, Chair. With respect to members, Chairperson, we have got enough members to proceed with the meeting, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nodada. Check your chat box and kindly rename the colleague on the platform. A very good morning to all of you colleagues on the platform. I know we have members from provincial legislatures, chairpersons of committees on finance, the Director General and the delegation from the National Treasury, the media and the public, and any other stakeholder that might be present in our meeting today. Let me welcome you all to this important engagement between the Select Committee on Appropriation and the National Treasury. Colleagues, the purpose of today's meeting is to receive and deliberate on the 2025 Division of Revenue, the Appropriation Bill, and the Public Sector Pension and Related Payments Bill, which is a new bill that will be introduced to the committee. Members may remember that we've already dealt with the ESCOM bill, though we have not yet tabled it to the House. These bills were tabled by the Minister of Finance in Parliament as part of the 2025 budget. These three bills, colleagues, represent a legal instrument through which government's fiscal policy is operationalized. They are central to ensuring that our national priorities are translated into actionable plans, funded programs, and service delivery at the levels of government. As such, it is our constitutional responsibility as a Committee on Appropriations to scrutinize these bills not only for compliance and fiscal discipline, but for their ability to respond to socio-economic challenges faced by our people on the ground. The three bills, like I mentioned, the first one will be the Division of Revenue Bill, which gives effect to Section 214 of the Constitution and sets out how nationally raised revenue is equitably divided among the national, the province, and the local spheres. It must be assessed in light of the obligations placed on each sphere, the performance of intergovernmental transfers, and the redistributive impact on poor and underserved communities. The second bill, which is the Appropriation Bill, will provide for the allocation of funds from National Revenue Fund to various departments for their programs and priorities. It must be interrogated for alignment with policy commitment, the state of departmental performance, and the ability to deliver the value for money. I think these are the two bills which members are most familiar with. But the last bill, which is the Public Sector Pension and Related Payments Bill, will also play a critical role in ensuring that the state meets its financial obligations to current and former public servants. While smaller in scope, it is no less important for maintaining trust and honoring commitments made to public employees. National Treasury and Director General, we appreciate the work undertaken by your good selves in preparing for these bills under very constrained fiscal conditions. We are mindful of the difficult trade-offs that had been made, and we recognize the complex balancing act between sustainability, growth, and equity. At the same time, we must also ensure that our oversight as members remains robust, forward-looking, and focused on long-term development impact. Therefore, colleagues, I will look forward into the engagements, the deliberations, and the presentations from the National Treasury. Mr. Nodada, can you confirm whether we have apologies or we do not have apologies? Welcome once again all the colleagues on the platform, and recognizing the provinces or the chairpersons of committees in provinces that have joined the meeting. A very good morning to you all. Mr. Nodada.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning, Chairperson, and honorable members and colleagues. Excuse me. Chairperson, from the committee, we have two apologies, Mr. Khatebe and Mr. Ryder. They will join the meeting after 10. They are attending another meeting right now, Chairperson, which is clashing with this meeting. We also have an apology from Deputy Minister Sarupen. He will leave early due to a flight that he must catch. Chairperson, we also from provincial portfolio committees, we received an apology from Northern Cape Chairperson Honorable Davis, from the Eastern Cape Budget Committee, Free State Portfolio Committee. However, I've noted that there is an honorable member from Northern Cape that is present on the platform. I think it's Honorable Farways. Chairperson, we have a few confirmations. Honorable Mosia, Chairperson from the Gauteng Portfolio Committee, the list of members of the Portfolio Committee from Mpumalanga has just been submitted to us just right now. Those are the few confirmations that we have, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nodada. Welcome, colleagues, on today's meeting of the Select Committee on Appropriation. And also let me welcome the Deputy Minister Sarupen and thank him for being with us. I saw his name on the platform. He has already joined a meeting. Before handing over to the DG to lead with the presentations, colleagues, I must indicate that we will have all the three bills being presented to us, and then we will engage with the three bills after all of them are presented. And I am going to request the National Treasury to at least use 1 hour, 20 minutes to brief us on the three bills so that we have enough time for members to can engage with the bills. Over to you, Honorable Sarupen, the Deputy Minister for Finance, and welcome to the meeting once again. It was a mistake that I did not recognize you when I opened the meeting. You are welcomed and you may lead the discussion. Then you'll hand over to the DG to lead the presentations. Thank you very much. Over to you, GM.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and good morning and welcome to all the members and the members from the provinces, the committee chairs, and members of the media and other stakeholders present. Thank you for the introduction, the warm welcome, and more importantly, Chair, thank you for recognizing that budgeting is but a balancing act and trade-offs. So we will introduce the three bills as you said, and I thank you for the opportunity to present these bills. The first two bills, of course, give legal effect to the budget as tabled by the Minister of Finance, and they are the central instruments for our ability to implement our fiscal policy and priorities for the next year. The Division of Revenue Bill, of course, will give effect to Section 214 of the Constitution to ensure that we provide equitable, and that's a key word there, Chair, equitable division of nationally raised revenue between the national, provincial, and local spheres of government. And this bill reflects that we are committed to ensuring that all spheres of government are able to meet the needs of our citizens and our constitutional mandates. And within the current fiscal context, Chair, the bill is designed to carefully balance fiscal consolidation and other needs with the primary focus on protecting core service delivery functions, particularly in healthcare, education, and infrastructure, where the provinces have had some difficulties over the last few years as well. The Appropriation Bill, of course, will set out the spending allocations for national departments and entities as part of the government's policy priorities. The appropriations are framed within the broader path of stabilizing debt while ensuring that we reprioritize expenditure towards supporting growth in infrastructure, security, and critical social services. At the same time, the bill reflects our efforts to improve the composition of our spending, reduce waste, and ensure that we get better value for money from the public purse. So, Chair, these bills, and as well as the third bill, is now before your committee. And of course, I welcome robust engagement from this committee, as we always do, in the bills that we are presenting to you. And I will hand over to the Treasury team, led by the DDG for, I think the DDG is on, to table these bills before you. I'm not sure which bill we're starting with. Let me hand over to the Treasury team to start their presentations.
Over to you, DDG.
Good morning, Chair, members, DM, and colleagues on the platform. I will start with our Division of Revenue bill, as I suppose as we always do. Thank you, Chair. I'll hand over to Dr. Elizabeth Papakis for presentation.
Thank you, DDG, for the opportunity. Good morning to the chairperson and the honorable members. Lubabalo, if I can please, okay, I think something is coming up. I was struggling to project my presentation. Just a second, honorable members. Okay. I'm trying to share my screen. I hope you can see my presentation, honorable members.
Yes, we are able to see your presentation, Doctor.
Okay, thank you so much, Chairperson. I think as an intro, I just want to perhaps, put it to yourselves that there are really minimal changes from the presentation that we shared with you previously when we met presenting this bill. What is quite important to just state from the onset is that there are no changes as a result of the VAT reversal on the baselines of both the provinces and municipalities. So the changes that I'm going to talk to, which of course are as a result of the VAT reversal, are actually the changes that are in the provisional allocations, and those provisional allocations were not yet effected into the baselines of provinces and municipalities. So that's a key and important point to start off with, as this bill really doesn't disrupt the planning and the documentation that had to be prepared by the provinces for their relative legislatures. Chairperson, I have quite a lot of slides, so I'm going to run through them just to save us some time. Quite important, I think yourself, Honorable Chairperson, and the Deputy Minister have already spoken to the Division of Revenue and what it aims to achieve. So key to perhaps the changes that I want to bring to your attention are that there's been no changes to the baseline allocations as indicated. However, there's a slight improvement in terms of the share of provincial sphere And this is as a result of an amendment that happened at a national level, which then favored the provincial share in terms of the allocation. So the provincial share increases from the 41.9% that we had shared with you previously to 42% now. So that's really something great to share with yourselves. And obviously, the honorable members, as we go through these changes, they should just be mindful of something that concerns us all around the debt service cost, as that line item in terms of this fiscal framework is the one that grows quite significantly at 7.4%, growing much higher than the other items from this slide. It's also indicated about the nature of the redistributive division of revenue. This is just to confirm that the division of revenue still remains a tool for redistribution, and it's a reliable one because it then subsidizes indigent households in the poorer regions, be it the provinces or municipalities, much more than it does for those that are staying in more affluent areas. And this is not to rob them, by the way, it's just to also recognize that they also have other revenue sources in the municipal space. The booming property market, would then subsidize for the provision of services there, and also the demand for services. Industries are in those areas, so even the trading services income and surpluses are quite higher in the more affluent areas, needing then for the state to subsidize quite heavily the more rural of the areas. Here, honorable members, I think we've already tendered an apology, but I think we could never do much of that. So there was an oversight on our part, a mistake that was made by the Department of Agriculture in terms of one of its conditional grants, which is the CASP, the Comprehensive Agriculture Support Program grant, where allocations for the Northwest were given to Northern Cape, vice versa. So we have an opportunity then through this bill to then correct that oversight. It's something that we could have seen and addressed, and this has given us an opportunity to then do that. So the impact is on the conditional grants allocations to the two provinces, but also the total transfers then to the two provinces are also changed as a result. There are no changes, honorable members, in terms of the PERS formula, in terms of what we had presented to you earlier on. Suffice to say, we are in the process of working with State SA in terms of ensuring that we are in a position to get a proper and a clear understanding around the income and expenditure data so that it can inform the 2026 budget. No changes to the additional allocations for wage bill that we provided. There's also no change to the budget facility for infrastructure allocations. We're also still excited about the 1.2 billion that has been added to the provincial equitable share for the PES, which is the Presidential Employment Stimulus initiative there. So it's only for the current year, which is 25-26, with the review currently ongoing to inform how then that is going to work in the years to come. Quite importantly, there's a creation of 46,000 jobs that we're looking forward to. Again, there are no changes in terms of the CASP allocations as they related to the reprioritization that was made there towards the blended financing mechanism. So those stay as they were. However, in terms of the public works, so since there was a merger of the two public works grants, so what this budget and the May budget has allowed us to do is then to also look at the impact at the provincial level. So there were some measures, for instance, in Gauteng, one of the entities that was actually driving the EPWP in the province has since moved to another department. So through this budget, we're just ensuring that the funds flow towards that new department now, but the same entity will still be delivering the same program. And of course, for KZN, there's a measure in terms of the departments that are doing that. We're also just reflecting the new department that will be delivering that. In terms of the provisional allocations, this is where the change is then, honorable members. So I would urge for your attention at this point. So we had previously indicated that there was 29.8 billion that was allocated towards the education sector. It was mainly for compensation and improved conditions in the education space, but also for ECD improvements. So that has since been reduced. It's no longer that 29.8, it is now 19.5. However, what hasn't changed is the ECD allocation. So here, in terms of the ECD, government is still committed to increasing the subsidy per child from the 17 rands to 24, and how then that is going to be implemented. It has started being implemented. I think later on in one of my slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about the process that we have embarked on to ensure that is effected immediately. Also in the health space, I think we had about 28 billion in additions there. So that has since been reduced to 20. However, government is still committed to increasing the provision, especially for the accruals in the health space, but also making provision for new doctors and nurses, as well as ensuring that goods and services are also provided for in this budget. So there's really still commitment from government to ensure that the health sector gets the needed attention that it requires. In terms of the local government allocations, honorable members, there are no changes except for one that relates to the metro trading services, the provisional allocation even there. So we still maintain the same updates that we had presented to yourselves. Quite importantly is perhaps for you to note that the two components on the right of your screen, the institutional and the community services, are actually the ones that are only going to the more poorer municipalities, and through the revenue adjustment factor, those that are less capacitated revenue-wise get a substantial share of those allocations, while all the municipalities are then fully subsidized for the provision of free basic services. Perhaps something that concerns us and should concern the honorable members as well is that from the 11.2 million households that we're providing for, data coming from Stats SA indicates that less than 3 million households are actually getting the service. No changes there, still the new grant, and the only change really is the one that relates to the provisional allocation. Previously we had indicated that there was an 8.5 billion addition that was going to come through the provisional allocation for the metro trading services. That has been reduced, honorable members, to 6.4 billion. So we still think it's still a substantial amount to drive the necessary reforms in that space. No changes in terms of the bill clauses in the main, except for the one change. So here, honorable members, I think what this budget has taught us is that they actually we needed to align with the PFMA in terms of Section 29 thereof. So we have amended the Division of Revenue Bill clauses, Section 27 2B, where it starts to make a provision for a 10% spending, maximum spending, meaning the allocation then that can be released to provinces and municipalities before the bill is passed in months to come, post in the 4 months that already is being provided for. So that is just to clarify and align with other legislations. Then quickly, these changes are then, these slides just speaks to where these changes are, honorable members. So with your indulgence, I would like not to concentrate much on that because they are we're pressed for time and there are still other presentations to be made as well. But if the members are interested in knowing where they can see the changes that we've spoken about, the schedules and Part A is where they would start to see some of these changes as articulated in that slide. We've also made some changes, honorable members, in terms of the frameworks, the annexures as well as appendices. So we here outline those. I've already spoken to some of these, especially around the public works, APWP programs. So I would like not to get into those ones. I've spoken about the ECD, the early release here. So as this bill hasn't been passed, obviously it means that since we have begun the process of increasing the subsidy, so we needed to then bring forward the allocations that ordinarily would have been spent later in the year. So that's how we've managed to control for that particular challenge. However, there still might be a need for additional resources. So I think there's a way in which that can be done. When we do the gazetting, we're just asking that the honorable members endorse that we actually make the changes to the framework once those numbers have been finalized, so that they can then be affected in terms of the framework. Already, we have received now communication from the Department of Health in terms of the impact of the US aid withdrawal. And here we're looking also at how then do we start to provide support to the provinces that are affected by this. Quite importantly, honorable members, is that this is for the US aid only. So other donor funding continue. Therefore, when we then make a provision around this, we'll be replacing what is being taken out. So we should really not expect that provinces that were not benefiting from this US aid would then get additional resources. To make this happen, we're also going to be making changes to the framework that guides this, so that we're able to earmark these funds for that particular purpose. Honorable members, this is the end of the presentation, and also I think it should be taken in light of the other reforms that are currently taking place. There's a review of the white paper led by the Department of Cooperative Governance, and the Treasury is leading the funding model for local government as well. So as soon as those pieces of work are done, then they're going to be incorporated into these budgets. Thank you very much, DDG and Deputy Minister. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Pakis, DDG.
Honorable Chair, now is the time for Public Finance to present DDG Ulrike Britton.
Chair, we will go straight without wasting any time. We'll ask Ms. Magazzi to present. Thank you.
Thank you so much, DDG, and good morning to the honorable members. May I ask the Secretary to project the presentation on my behalf, please?
Mr. Nodada and Estelle.
Is the other presentation? The other one? It's the appropriation bill, colleagues.
I thought it's the public sector.
The appropriation bill, please. All right, thank you very much, and thank you to the honorable members. My name is Tobisa Makazi, as already outlined, and Tobisa Makazi, and I'm a director in the Office of the DDG Public Finance. I see we don't have the latest version, which updated the presentation, the cover slide, but no transmesh. The presentation and content itself is still relevant. I will then present, sorry, I just want to get my bearings in order on this side as well. Thank you so much. So in terms of our overview and the presentation, I'm on slide number 3, Controller. We just want to provide a context which has been outlined in our previous presentation as well. As by now, we are all aware that the Minister has tabled the budget, together with that an appropriation bill, which took place on the 21st of May, 2025. In terms of which, Section 2132 of the Constitution provides that money may be withdrawn from the National Revenue Fund only in terms of an appropriation act of Parliament, or as a direct charge to against the fund, when it's provided for in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. In terms of Section 26 of the PFMA, it provides that Parliament must appropriate money for each financial year of the requirements of the state, for the requirements of the state. Section 7.171 of the Money Bills and Related Monies Act provides that the Minister of Finance must table the annual budget as set out in Section 27 of the Public Finance Management Act in the National Assembly at the same time as the Appropriation Bill. In the next slide, we provide an overview of the Money Bills and Related Monies Act insofar as the powers and functions relating to the Committee and Committee of Finance and the Committee of Appropriation as it pertains to the bill. In terms of Section 4 of that Act, the Committee on Finance has powers and functions, of course, to consider and report on the national macroeconomic and fiscal policy and amendments to the fiscal framework, and any revisions to the fiscal framework and revenue proposals that are contained in the bill and amendments thereto. It as well as also provide for functions to consider actual expenditure published by the National Treasury. The Committee on Appropriations, I think the committee members are very much aware in terms of what those powers are, in terms of what has been conferred to this particular structure, insofar as consideration of reports and spending issues, and amendments to the Division of Revenue and Appropriation Bill and adjusted appropriation, among others. In terms of Section 8.3 of the Committees of Finance, the Committee of Finance must, within 16 days or as soon as reasonable possible thereafter, needs to submit a report to the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces on the fiscal framework and revenue proposals. In terms of Section 9.3 of the Division of Revenue Bill, the bill must be passed within 35 days after adoption of the fiscal framework by Parliament or as soon as reasonably possible thereafter. In terms of Section 10.7, Parliament must pass the appropriation bill within or without amendments within 4 months after the start of a financial year. In the next slide, then, we deal with the processes around the passing of the appropriation bill, which is currently on slide number 5. When it comes to the Money Bills Related Act, it further requires that after the tabling of the national budget, the appropriation bill must be referred to the Committee on Appropriations of the National Assembly after the adoption of the fiscal framework. The minister must present proposals outlining strategic priorities, measurable objectives, and performance information for each department, public entity, as well as institutions. Cabinet members must also present updated strategic plans for each department and public entities and institution, and the bill needs to be referred to this particular structure and the select committee, which is the Committee on Appropriations of the Council, after being referred to the National Assembly. So what I do need to highlight, and I think just moving on to the next slides, which is slides number 6 to 18, we will then be going into greater detail about the structure and the main features of the appropriation bill, highlighting, among others, the process around the appropriation of money for requirements of the state, the amounts that are listed as specifically and exclusively appropriated, the conditions for appropriations and the use of unspent funds, and the authorization process of expenditure and the delegations and authorization, and also the regulations that can be established by the Minister of Finance. On the next slide, which is slide number 7, I then go into the details as already alluded to in the previous slide. I'm on slide 7, Chair. According to Section 2 of the bill, which deals with the appropriation of money for requirements of the state, appropriations by Parliament of money from the National Revenue Fund for requirements of the state in 2024-25 financial year to votes and main divisions within a vote, and for the purposes are specified and are set out in Schedule 1 of the 2025 Appropriation Bill. The spending of appropriations is subject to the Appropriation Act, as well as the PFMA and the Division of Revenue Act for the 2025 and 26 financial year. The spending of funds withdrawn from the National Revenue Fund before the Act takes effect, as envisaged in terms of Section 29.1 of the Public Finance Act, is subject to Section 7 of the Appropriation Act of 2024. Continuation of the same section of the Act, for government component within a vote, each segment of its transfer and subsidy in Schedule 1 of the PFMA is set out in Schedule 2 of the Appropriation Bill. A segment set out in Schedule 2 of the bill is regarded as a main division of the vote for purposes of this Act and PFMA. What is also quite critical to note, Chairperson and colleagues, and also honourable members, is the fact that when it comes to overspending and the treatment of overspending by a government component, if a government component overspends the total amount of the transfer or subsidy that it receives, or the total amount of the segment regarded as the main division, that spending must not be in accordance with or in instances where spending is not in accordance with the purpose, that sort of spending would constitute an unauthorized expenditure in terms of the PFMA. The head of the government component that receives the transfer and subsidy is accountable for any unauthorized expenditure that may be incurred as a result of the issues that have been outlined in the previous slide. In slide number 10, we then set out the requirements when it comes to the specifically and exclusively appropriated funds. It's important to note, Chair and honourable members, that an amount that has been earmarked as exclusively and specifically and exclusively appropriated in Schedule 1 or 2 of the Act may be used only for the purpose indicated, unless that amount or purpose is amended by or in terms of an Act of Parliament. When it comes to the issues around the conditions of appropriations, in terms of this, the Minister of Finance in writing may impose conditions, including but not limited to earmarking or of an amount in Schedule 1 or 2 of the Act, or any other conditional allocation to promote transparency and accountability and effective management of appropriation. The Minister may also direct that in writing, as already outlined, the stoppage in terms of use of money of an amount in respect of conditions that have been imposed and that have not been met. It further also, this particular section also does provide instances under which the Minister may, on application of an accounting officer, amend or in certain circumstances withdraw the conditions that have been imposed in terms of earmarked allocations as well. The Minister may also direct that the stoppage of an amount must be disclosed in the National Treasury next quarterly report to report to the relevant parliamentary committee. In the next slide, then, we delve a little bit more on the issues around the use of unspent funds as set out in Section 5 of the bill. Despite Section 3 of the Act and Section 43(4) of the PFMA, the Minister in writing may approve that unspent funds in an amount in Schedule 1 or 2 to the Appropriation Act for transfers and subsidies to other institutions may be used for any purpose within the same vote. That payments for capital assets may be used for any purpose within the same vote, or payment of financial assets may be used for any purpose within the same vote. The sum of the unspent funds in a main division or a vote approved for use in another main division of that vote may not exceed 8% of the amount appropriated under the main division. On slide 14, we carry on the discussion around the unspent funds. When it comes to the approval of unspent funds, those needs to be disclosed in the National Treasury next quarterly report to the relevant parliamentary committee. And these are provisions that are also contained in Section 43. And what is also critical to note is that the sum of the unspent fund under the classification in the main division within a vote approved for use may only exceed 8% of the amount appropriated for the classification with the approval of the minister. In the next slide, we then deal with the issues around the authorization of expenditure. The minister, despite any provision in any legislation to the contrary, the minister may approve expenditure if it cannot reasonably be delayed, and there are certain instances such may take place. For one, if that expenditure is unforeseen and unavoidable, and in exceptional cases which, if not approved, it is likely to cause serious prejudice to public interest, where an amount has been announced during the tabling of the 2025 annual budget or an adjustment budget. And also, if the amount has been approved in appropriations for 24-25 financial year, that must be proposed to be rolled over to the 2024 financial year in order to finalize expenditure that cannot take place in 2025 financial as originally planned. It's important to also note, honorable members, that the total amount of expenditure that can be approved using this particular provision may not exceed the total amount of contingency reserves. And for the 2024-25 financial year, our contingency reserve is sitting at 5 billion rand. When it comes to the authorization, if the minister announced an amount for a specific item during the tabling of the annual budget or the adjustment budget, any expenditure approved may not exceed that amount. Expenditure approved in terms of Section 6 may be would be either regarded as a direct charge against the National Revenue Fund and must be attributed to a vote, is subject to conditions that the minister may impose and must be disclosed in the National Treasury next quarterly report to the relevant parliament. In the next slide, we then delve a little bit on the delegation of powers conferred on the minister and the authorization process around that. The minister, in terms of the Act, may delegate to an employee of the National Treasury any power conferred on the minister in terms of the Act, except Section 9 of the Act. The minister may also authorize an employee of the National Treasury to perform any duty imposed on the minister in terms of the Act. When it comes to the delegation itself and the authorization must be in writing, and it's subject to any limitations or conditions that the minister may impose, and may authorize the employee to sub-delegate in writing the delegated power or authorize duty to another suitable employee of the National Treasury. It must be noted, however, Chairperson and honorable members, that this particular delegation does not divest the minister of the responsibility concerning the exercise of the delegated power or the performance of the authorized duty. And the minister may at any given point withdraw that written delegation. The minister may also vary or revoke any decision taken by an employee as a result of the delegation or authorization, subject to any rights that may have vested as a result of the decision. The minister and the just for also noting by the committee and by the honorable members, when it comes to setting of regulations pertaining to the Act, the minister may, by notice of Gazette, regulate with regards to the consequences of the amendment of the withdrawal of the conditions in terms of section 4 of 2 as outlined in the earliest sections of the presentation, and any ancillary and incidental administrative or procedural matters that is necessary to describe for proper implementation and administration of this particular act. I will now then, Chairperson, go and just discuss quite briefly what are the provisions in terms of execution of expenditure before the promulgation of the bill itself. Prior to the 2025 bill being promulgated, departments can and will incur expenditure in terms of section 29, of the PFMA, which makes provision for spending before an annual budget is passed. In terms of this particular section, if an annual budget is not passed before the start of a financial year to which it relates, funds may be withdrawn in accordance with this section from the relevant revenue fund for the services of the state or the province concerned during that financial year as a direct charge against the fund until the budget is passed. In terms of section 29.2, funds withdrawn from the national revenue in terms of subsection 1 may be utilized only for services which funds were appropriated in the previous annual budget or adjustment budget, and may not, during the first 4 months of that financial year, exceed 45% of the total amount appropriated in the previous annual budget. During each of the following months, exceed 10% of the total amount appropriated in the previous annual budget, and in aggregate exceed the total amount appropriated in the previous annual budget. When it comes to the promulgation of the promulgation of the 2025 appropriation bill is therefore necessary to allow for expenditure above the transitional provisions contained in the PFMA, and it also ensures in accordance with the vote and program purpose as stated in the Act. I will now then, Chair, as I draw towards the conclusion of the presentation, just give the honourable members a synopsis or just a flavouring of what is in fact in the Appropriation Act itself, as particularly Schedule 1, as it relates to appropriations for votes, for different votes. In slide 22, we provide a summary of the appropriations by vote, which basically is that will be allowing then for the execution once approval of the budget for the execution against the revenue fund for these particular appropriations as assigned to these different departments. When it comes to appropriations by economic classification, it is notable from the Appropriation Act itself that transfers and subsidies constitute the bulk of the economic classification funding, which in the main relates to funding that has been provided for local government, equitable share, and for grants such as MIG, and transfers to the health mainly account for the public entities and the human resources and training grant, and transfers specifically to portfolios such as basic education mainly account for infrastructure grant and school nutrition program, while higher education transfers are mainly subsidies for universities and NSFAS. Under the Department of Social Development, the social grants and transport, those mainly transfers mainly relate to SANDAL, PRASAL, and grants that are towards the provincial road maintenance grant and public transport operations and network operations. In the next slide, we just give a bit of flavoring to the committee on what has been the revisions to the non-interest expenditure. What is key to note in terms of this particular slide is that the non-interest expenditure has increased from 1.84 trillion in 2024 to 1.88 trillion in 2024-25. The 2025 budget funded spending pressures, funding pressures of 180.1 billion over the MTF, of which 87.3 billion, 48.5% was for 24-25, sorry. The spending additions are partially offset by drawdowns on provisional allocations and contingency reserves, resulting in a net increase in non-interest expenditure of 43.5 billion in 2025-26 and 74.4 billion over the medium-term period. On the next slide, we do provide a bit of flavoring to the committee around the spending additions that have been included specifically in year 2024-25, which aggregated amount to 87.3 billion. As colleagues and members, honorable members might be aware at the stage, the 2024-25 budget basically includes provisional allocations for frontline services that amount to 12.2 billion, which includes 6.7 billion for compensation and essential services in health, which basically would facilitate the employment of 800 doctors who are in posts in service, and about 4,700 health posts, and address shortages in medical goods and services and accruals over the MTF period. It includes 5.1 billion for provisional education compensation costs, which will safeguard positions and provide for improved access to quality ECD education over the MTF period. Included in the provisional allocation as well is 2 billion of a 4 billion that has been allocated to SARS, which basically supplement a further 3.5 billion that was already proposed during the time of the MTBPS towards improving efficiencies and transparency in the tax administration. The allocations also include 1.6 billion increase in terms of grant allocations that has been provided in 2025-26 financial year. There is also in the allocations for 2025, the 35.2 billion that has been allocated for purposes of extending the temporary COVID CRD grant by a single year up until 31st of March 2026. The allocations do also include 7.3 of the 23.4 billion that has been allocated over the MTF for the 25 public service wage agreement and carry-through costs. There is also a further 2.5 billion of a 5.5 billion that has been committed over the MTF period for purposes of early retirement costs, which basically would be targeting 15,000 public service employees between years 2024-25, 25-26, and 26-27. There is also a further 1 billion that has been provided for the Western Cape Rapid Public Schools program. On the next slide, we also just provide a further summary in terms of the additional appropriations, which particularly when it comes to the infrastructure, as colleagues and honorable members would be aware, there has been an additional allocation that has been provided of 33.7 billion for critical infrastructure projects, of which 7.9 billion of that amount is allocated in 2025-26. This includes support for projects approved as part of the budget facility for infrastructure, as well as investment in the passenger rail transport to modernize signaling technology systems that will improve service frequency and safety and efficiency. The budget also aims to reverse declining water, electricity, and solid waste services, as already alluded by my colleague in his presentation on the DORA, that there is a further 6.4 billion that has been provided for over the MTF period, of which 2.1 billion would flow in 2024-25 financial year. When it comes to the provisional allocations, I think I've already spoken quite extensively to this, so I will skip to the last slide, which is slide 30. Honorable members and Honorable Chair, we do also just want to signal some of the issues that were pronounced during the tabling of the speech by the Minister as it pertains to spending pressures that would need to be financed during the course of the financial year. And these relate to the withdrawal of the Presidency Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, commonly known as PEFA, which was previously funded by the USAID. There is also a need for funding of infrastructure projects through the BFI and the passenger rail PRASA rolling stock fleet renewable program. There's also a need for us to urgently accommodate costs pertaining to population changes, which have an impact on the provisional equitable share allocation, as well as a need to build capacities in the Office of the Chief Justice and State Statistics South Africa. There are also additional provisions or announcements that were made by the Minister during the tabling as it pertains to political party funding and provision of infrastructure for royal houses, as well as we had heard quite eloquently outlined by the President last night, the rollout of the National Social Dialogue. So these are issues that will, as already announced by the Minister, in all likelihood be part of that contingency reserve that we had outlined in the earlier slides of 5 billion rands. Chairperson and honorable members, that brings me to the end of the presentation on the appropriation bill. Thank you so much for your indulgence.
Makaurekwe. Thank you, Ms. Magazi, for the presentation. Member Makaurekwe.
Now I think Advocate MP will present. Thank you.
Apologies, Chairperson. I was just struggling to unmute and put my video on. I will start presenting on a bill. Thank you for the opportunity, and also to the committee members present, and Deputy Minister Sarupen. Now, the presentation is dealing with you, gave an introduction at the beginning with the public sector pension and related payments bill. Now, the bill deals with, sorry, I'm still struggling to see my full screen, apologies. Now, the bill that was introduced earlier this year deals with a proposed direct charge to be if approved by the committee for certain pension related payments that is currently made from the vote from National Treasury. I'm just first going to deal with the sorry, can I, apologies, Chair, can I possibly ask the committee to rather share the presentation, because I'm struggling on my side. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so now we can go to the next slide. So I'll deal with the provisions of the Constitution, and then I'll deal with examples of current direct charges in Acts of Parliament, and then briefly explain what we regard as a direct charge, and then the proposed direct charges in the bill, and then there's also a proposal in the bill on how to amend the schedule to the bill. Next slide, please. Now, the Constitution provides in Section 213 that money may be withdrawn from the National Revenue Fund in two ways. The first is an appropriation by an Act of Parliament, and the appropriation bill that my colleague dealt with now is one of those examples. And then also, or it could be a direct charge against the National Revenue Fund when it's provided for either in the Constitution or in an Act of Parliament. Now, as to examples of direct charges provided for in the Constitution, that would be the salaries, allowances, and etc., payable to members of the National Assembly, permanent members of the National Council of Provinces, and also the members of provincial legislatures. And the other direct charge is the provincial equitable share of revenue that's raised nationally, which is also regarded as a direct charge. Next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide? Oh, thank you, sorry. Then as to examples in Acts of Parliament where there's direct charges, the Public Finance Management have three of those. The first is emergency funding. Actually, sorry, there's more of that. Emergency funding under Section 16, and also expenditure before the annual budget is passed, dealt with in Section 29 that my colleague also dealt with in her presentation. And then payments under guarantees, indemnities, and securities are also regarded as direct charges. And another category is the repayment of government loans and interest payments. And then also salaries of the president, deputy president, judges, and magistrates are regarded as direct charges. Then in the Annual Appropriation Acts, in clause 6 in the current bill that's before the committee, you will note that payments from the contingency reserve is also regarded as direct charges. Another example of a current act providing for direct charges is the Public Audit Access Act, which provide for the public audit access fee paid to the AG, and that is in instances where the audit fee is above a certain percentage. In the case of municipalities, then that payment to the Auditor General to cover the expense is regarded as a direct charge. Now, other examples of direct charges is in the Skills Development Levies Act. It's the percentage that are of skills levies that are paid to CETA, and also the National Skills Fund. Then in tax legislation, the general fuel levy sharing with metropolitan municipalities. And then there's also an example of payments to the International Oil Pollution Compensation Fund. Now that's paid by oil importers. There's a levy paid every year based on a calculation that's submitted by the Pollution Fund that's based in the UK. That is regarded as a direct charge. Just to indicate how direct charges are, or there's transparency in respect of direct charges. Now, in the monthly statements of actual revenue and expenditure regarding the NRF, there's a requirement in Section 32 of the PFMA that these statements must be published within 30 days after the end of each month. And you will note in those statements, all the direct charges are specified specifically according to items. It's not just a general indication of what the direct charges in total will entail. Then the direct charges are also reflected in the annual budget review and also in the estimates of national expenditure. Next slide, please. Now, what we regard as a direct charge and as the African legal system is an amount that's directly paid from the National Revenue Fund, and the amount thereof is not like appropriations specified in the legislation. So you wouldn't see the particular amount, or just say the following kind of expenditure is regarded as a direct charge. Now, we submit that direct charges should apply to spending items that, firstly, the category that requires certainty for recipients, such as salaries and pension contributions of the judiciary, parliamentarians, and provinces receiving the equitable share, and also lenders receiving repayments on government loans. Another category would be expenditure that should not be delayed until the enactment of an Appropriation Act. Now, for example, the emergency funding I mentioned under Section 16 of the PFMA, and also spending pending an enactment of the Annual Appropriation Act, and that's Section 29 of the PFMA, and also the use of the contingency reserve. Then the last category, which we also submit should be regarded as a direct charge, are payments under cross-cutting legal obligations of government, which varies to the extent that the required annual appropriations for these cannot be determined upfront with certainty. Next slide. Now, in the bill that's before the committee for consideration, the bill proposes that the public sector related pension, post-retirement, medical and other benefit in terms of statutory and collective agreement obligations become direct charges against the National Revenue Fund. And you will see that if you look at clause 1 and the schedule to the bill. Now, though it's applicable across the public sector for obligations under various pieces of legislation and collective agreements, these payments to date have been made under the vote of National Treasury, and that's under Program 7, as it was not possible to link the required, the beneficiaries to particular institutions. Now, the These payments are dependent on a varying number of qualifying persons and the beneficiaries in a given period. So determining reliable amounts for appropriations under a single vote are not possible. And this results in environments and adjustments to top up the contributions, the magnitude of which should not be accommodated in a single vote. Next slide, please. Now, the schedule to the bill includes the proposed list of the kind of payments that should be regarded as direct charges. The first one would be pension benefits for former presidents, employee pension contributions by members of parliament who are members of the Political Office Bearers Fund, then also the pension benefits for retired government officials as a result of injury on duty and their medical cost. Now, for example, the expenditure on this amount or the appropriation for this amount last year was 750 million. Then also the medical schemes contributions for retired Public Service Act employees, retired parliamentary staff and retired magistrates. Now the amount for last year for this was more than 5 billion. Then payments, benefit payments under the Special Pensions Act, that was approximately 480 million. And then the last category, pension benefits and medical costs for ex-service staff under the Military Pensions Act. That amount was more than 230 million in the previous financial year. And then you also note in the schedule at the bottom that these payments include dependents or beneficiaries where applicable. Next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Mr. Nodada Estelle.
I'm not sure who's controlling. Okay, thank you very much. Now, yeah, it's still stuck on that page. Chair, if you may, I can just quickly speak to save time to the last slide, which deals with a provision that enables the minister to amend the schedule subject to public consultation and parliamentary approval. Now, the following kind of amendments is proposed that could be made by the minister is to specify the meaning of particular terms and also amending or omitting benefits or adding benefits of the same kind as a result of changes to legislation or collective agreements, or if there's a new piece of legislation that's adopted by Parliament or a collective agreement concluded, and also where required to align references with changes to legislation or collective agreements or new legislation or collective agreements. Now, the proposed it is proposed that with these amendments that Section 13 of the Money Bills and Related Matters Act applies to Parliament when it considered amendments to the schedule, and that means it would be referred to the Standing and Select Committee of Appropriations of the two houses. Now, then it's proposed that that these amendments, there's an opportunity for Parliament to consider it for a period of 3 months, but then if it's not considered during that period, it's proposed that it would be deemed approval by Parliament, and then subsequent to that, the minister must publish the amendments to the schedule in the Gazette. I just want to indicate this provision in clause 2 is similar to a current provision in the Financial Sector Levies and Deposit Insurance Act of 2022, and that deals with levies paid by financial service providers to financial sector bodies like the Pension Fund Adjudicator, Ombudsman, and also Financial Sector Conduct Authority. So there is precedent for this provision in current legislation. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Anything from your side, Mekha Rekwi or the Deputy Minister?
Chairperson, nothing to add from my side. I think we can firstly thank you for your time and then take questions.
Colleagues, it is now time for us to engage to the presentations. By show of hands, I will allow both the members from legislatures and members of the select committee to make deliberations, inputs, or comments on the three presentations we've just received. I see Honorable Siwisa, I see Honorable Majola, I see Honorable Swartz. Those are the three hands for now. I see Honorable Ngumalo and Honorable Henny Brett, Honorable Ndlovu. It's Honorable Siwisa, Honorable Majola, Honorable Swartz, Honorable Ngumalo, Honorable Brett, and Honorable Ndlovu. In that order, colleagues. Honorable Siwisa.
No, thank you, Chair, and greetings, Deputy Minister and your team. Chair, let's welcome the presentation. Apologies, Chair, I think I'm coming down with a cold or flu or something. I want to check, you know, Chairperson, yesterday we received a briefing from the AG pertaining the outcomes of the Auditor General in Gauteng, and there's a lot of things that were raised yesterday. And I'm also seeing some of those things, they are reflecting in some of the presentations that are happening. And I'm going to specifically speak about on the issue of unauthorized fruitless wasteful expenditure by government departments. And one of the issues that were raised yesterday by Gauteng, on the report of Gauteng from the AG's office, is that they do authorize, but there is a problem about overpricing when it comes to projects. And it became a worrisome. So if we've got unauthorized, fruitless, wasteful expenditure, or even overpricing, it means that there is going to be a slow response to service delivery. So when we speak about unauthorized, fruitless, wasteful expenditure, what mechanisms are put in place by the National Treasury to ensure that government departments or provinces or the local government do not actually proceed to find themselves with unauthorized, fruitless, or wasteful expenditure, even finding themselves that some of the officials actually approve overpricing when it comes to issues of constructions or of projects. That's one question that I have. Another one, we always find provinces or government departments returning funds to National Treasury. And it's worrisome because when you return funds, it means that somewhere there is no service delivery that is happening. So what mechanisms is National Treasury actually putting or going to apply to determine whether funds can be reallocated, and how can this return of funds to National Treasury be avoided by provinces and government? And again, what actually causes departments to actually return funds? Because they do apply for funds, they do get the allocation that they are looking for. But at the end of the day, provinces and government departments find themselves returning funds. We have a problem with local government, Deputy Minister, whereby local governments are underperforming dismally so. They are very underperforming. They don't know how to deal with their revenue. And some of these things rise from corrupt officials that are employed by some of this government, by these local municipalities. I'm going to make an example. The chairperson of infrastructure, the chairperson, I just need, it's only the chair. I don't have my notes here, but there is an issue at the Solbleke municipality where the head of infrastructure has been charged and is in court because of the issue of the corruption that happened during the building of the Kimberley Mental Hospital. And that guy is being charged. He's going to court. But for some reason, Solbleke municipality found themselves actually giving him a job at the municipality, again dealing with finances, again dealing with infrastructure. So those are some of the issues that we find in local government. And how is National Treasury actually going to make sure that our local governments, especially our municipalities in rural areas, excluding the metros, that they actually maintain their money in such a manner that they are going to ensure that there is service delivery that happens in those municipalities. At present, Chair, the appropriation bill has not been passed. We're still waiting. We are still in the process of the 31st of July to finalize the appropriation bill. How does the National Treasury control and monitor spending by government departments and provinces to ensure that whatever that we are dealing, the money that we have today is going to sustain us until the 31st? And then, Chairperson, some votes received more money, some money has been decreased, and the most affected cluster is the social cluster. What are the key justifications for this route that has been taken by National Treasury and Finance for the increase and decrease that is mostly affecting the decrease that is mostly affecting the social cluster? Further, what criteria was utilized to earmark specific and exclusive appropriations? And my last question, Chair, would be that how does National Treasury decide or when to appropriate and when not to appropriate? Has there ever been such a case whereby appropriation has been stopped? If it has to be stopped, what were the circumstances around that for appropriation to actually be stopped? I think, Chair, I'll stop there for now. Maybe the other questions I'll ask at a later stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Siwisa. Honorable Majola.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Greetings to the colleagues, members of the Appropriations Committee. Greetings to the members of the National Treasury led by the Director, the Deputy Minister, and the DDG. Madam Chair, mine will be clarity-seeking questions, starting with the appropriation bill. Madam Chair, during the presentation, we were referred to the specific legislations that every step that has been taken were as per the directive from those pieces of legislation, the Constitution, the PFMA, the Money Bill, Appropriation Act, etc. Madam Chair, number one, on the appropriation by main economic classification, one has noticed the highest, which is the transfer and subsidies, which is, Madam Chair, justifiable because we also have to take care of the provinces and local government, which makes 72.3%. The second highest classification there, Madam Chair, being the compensation of employees. My question there is to check whether do we have any guide from the pieces of legislations or regulations that restrict us in terms of how far can we spend in terms of the particular classification, in particular with regards to the compensation of the employees. That's number one. Number two, with regards to the non-interest expenditure, there is an expenditure there, Madam Chair, which it says provisionally allocated for COVID-19 social grant. Can maybe the presenters give a further explanation as to what's the meaning of provisional allocation? Because to me, it sounds as if it's hanging on the air. It's not been finalized as to where is it going. Still on that one, Madam Chair, the non-interest expenditure, I want to check the criteria or instrument used to determine one province, whereas all 9 provinces have a mandate to provide a service in terms of education. Why? What makes that Western Cape Rapid School Building Program isolated to the rest of the provinces? Maybe if one can get the clarity as to what exactly is specific compared to the other provinces. The other one, the pressure spending pressure. It got a couple of expenditure there and appropriations that has been mentioned. Office of the Chief Justice, and then infrastructure provision for Royal House, the national dialogue. I'm not clear, Madam Chair, because it's indicated that it was announced by the minister during the tabling of the budget. To me, unless if I'm using the different instrument of scale, which led us to have that pressure in terms of spending in line with those appropriations. Can we not, Madam Speaker, do a way to reduce the spending pressure with the national social dialogue? I don't know what is it, in fact. Again, is there any instrument used to measure the need which led to the spending pressure in terms of the provision of the Royal House? What's their status? And then what is the issue with the Office of the Chief Justice, which led us to have that spending pressure? The last one on the appropriation, Madam Chair, following the previous speaker in terms of departmental of votes appropriation in Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. It's make it difficult, Madam Chair, for us, unless if we are given the same column with the previous year to see the increase or a decrease in terms of the particular vote using education an example. What instrument we use to prioritize education against we are in an economic crisis, Madam Chair. We are battling to arrive at 2% in the economic growth, but all the economic growth orientated vote items there and its increases, does it speak to what this budget will address in terms of the economic growth? That is the one, Madam Chair, for the appropriations. If maybe we can give in the impact between the previous financial year. Quick one on Division of Revenue Act. One, it's on slide 9, where it says the provincial equitable shares, it's determined by the formula. Well, I think there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 components of the formula, Madam Chair, but there is one which it says poverty, and then there is a percentage there that is given. And that box, Madam Chair, is highlighted in red. It says old data, 2010, 2011, income and expenditure. Madam Chair, does that box have some unfair in terms of provincial equitable shares? Because I think there has been a lot between that financial year 2010, 2011 changes in terms of the income and expenditure in terms of determining the poverty level. I want to check as to, does it make justice, Madam Chair, to arrive at a correct provincial equitable shares? That's number one with regards to the Division of Revenue Act. The second one, the Deputy Minister on his welcoming note highlighted the debt services cost, and he indicated that it remains a fast-growing expenditure at 7.6%. I want to check from the National Treasury, Madam Chair, number one, if they can give us the breakdown of our debt, the domestic one, the international one, and then with the intention, Madam Chair, as a question again, to check as to was any restructuring effort made in terms of reducing that alarming 7.4% expenditure from this debt services cost, renegotiating if we can, settling if we can, because, Madam Chair, really we cannot have that line item causing a bleed to our expenditure or appropriation processes. The last one is with regards to
The very last one, Honorable Majola.
The very last one, Madam Chair, is regards to the municipal appropriation. Well, I fully concur with the National Treasury with giving the rural municipality a bigger slice, but I want to check whether there is a plan to retain the status of the metros, because soon it will be taking the rural status in terms of the decaying infrastructure. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Majola. Honorable Swart.
Thank you. Am I audible? Can you hear me, Chair? Thank you,
Yes,
Chair,
continue, Honorable Swart.
and good day to all the presenters, and thank you, Deputy Minister, for all the hard work in your departments and the Minister and all your colleagues. Just a couple of questions. Honorable Majola covered some of also my concerns. I think, Chairperson, Deputy Minister, the concern is for us on the ground, you know, and also in the constituencies, and with my background from municipalities, the concern is municipalities. We are on the ground, in the face of the people, and also a big concern is, you know, the skills development. I think also Honorable Sir spoke about it, the overspending or underspending, and also fruitless spending on municipal level. And we really need to take up the skills development and empowering our colleagues at local level, you know, to really do justice to our people on the ground. On my first question, Honorable Chairperson, on the Division of Revenue Bill, on slide 2 is the overview of the presentation, where the presentation outlines key changes and allocations in the 25th Division of Revenue Bill. The question, given persistent fiscal pressures, how does this year's Division of Revenue Bill adjust to accommodate the socioeconomic challenges and fiscal constraints identified in the March and May 25 budgets? Chair, we really are challenged with real socioeconomic challenges in our country all over, and we really need to address that going forward. I know that we're struggling. We're not there with the budget yet, but I think we're giving small steps forward. On slide 4, where the issue with the Constitution assigns expenditure responsibilities across spheres, but actual capacity and resources vary widely. The question is, how does Treasury ensure alignment between constitutionally assigned functions and actual implementation capacity across all spheres? Are there any plans to review revenue-raising powers of provinces and municipalities to better match their expenditure responsibilities? What is the situation with debts in our municipalities, and how do we, get to that point where municipalities do more to get the outstanding debts in their banking accounts? Because I know from the municipality where I come, municipalities really struggle to get the people paid for services all over. On slide 5, the debt service cost remains a fast-growing item, limiting funding for services. I think that's also Honourable Majola alluded to. At what point does Treasury assess the current trajectory of debt service to be fiscally unsustainable, and what corrective measures are envisaged? Because we are worried about the growing debt of our country. I just want to down and see other questions on slide 14. Local government transfers. Local government gets 9.7% of revenue, but has broader responsibilities in urban service delivery. The question is the 9.7% share adequate to meet the growing service delivery needs of municipalities, especially under fiscal austerity? How is Treasury addressing the performance gap between revenue-rich metros and under-resourced rural municipalities? Chair Lady, there's a growing service delivery need in municipalities, and we really need to address that. And that is a question that I want to put forward. The slide 21 to 22, the framework and provisional allocations, ECT grant subsidies are raised. Emergency funding is proposed for HIV services. The question is, what performance metrics will be used to assess whether the increased ECT per child subsidy improves access and quality? The second question is, what contingencies has Treasury put in place to respond to future donor withdrawals, such as the USAID exit from HIV/AIDS programming? And that's left a huge hole in our budget, and on how we can address that in the future. I think I'm gonna pause there first, Honourable Chair, and maybe later I've got 1 or 2 also on the appropriation. I'm gonna park that one there first. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Swart. Colleagues, let me allow Honourable Andiswa from one of the provinces. Honourable Andiswa Mosai, you may come in with your question. She was unable to raise a hand, but she has indicated that she has a question for the National Treasury. You may come in.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. It's Honorable Mosai from Gauteng Province. Let me greet all the members and also the Deputy Minister and officials. Chairperson, I just want to request the National Treasury to segment the allocation earmarked for servicing the health accruals in terms of the provinces. That's my question and request. Thank you so much.
That was so sweet and short. Thank you. Over to you, Honorable Nxumalo.
Thank you very much, Chair, and my humble greetings to your good self and all the members of the committee present here. Chairperson, I want to first welcome the presentation from the National Treasury. That's always with us to make sure that they assist us in whatever way. Chairperson, I think my high interest is on local government, Chair, to say that the local government equitable share formula fund of 11.2 million poor household, but is based on the outdated population and poverty data. Chairperson, it is a challenge on that side, but my question is, what step is Treasury taking to improve the accuracy of poor household estimate used in the formula? Chairperson, that's my number one. Will the 2025 MTEPF include a fully updated local government equitable share formula using the new 2022-23 data and 2025 population estimate? That is my question, Chair. The other one, because I am really interested on local government, is the issue on changes of local government allocation, which is on slide 16 and 17. Several grants are introduced, emerged, or discontinued, including the UDFG and the MSEG. Chairperson, the question is, what specific outcomes Treasury is targeting with the new urban development financial grant, and how will it successfully be measured? Chairperson, the other matter is on, let me go to the next one, which talks to slide number 12 and 13 on the appropriation bill, Chair. It's the use of unspent fund. Chairperson, I think it is a challenge that we know that some department are failing to spend based on the allocation, Chair. How does Treasury determine when unspent fund can be reallocated? That is number one. What accountability measures exist to prevent misuse of reallocated funds? Because sometimes, somewhere, somehow, the funds are misused on those allocated funds. Chairperson, that's my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Nxumalo. Honorable Brits.
Good morning, Honorable Chairperson. Also, very welcome to the Deputy Minister and all the officials from National Treasury. I have a few questions that I wish to raise. Firstly, what support is National Treasury currently giving to municipalities in respect of technical and governance support? And why I'm asking is, how will the discontinuation of the Municipal Systems Improvement Grant influence the support given to municipalities, especially in struggling municipalities? Secondly, referring to slides 19 and 20, how does the amendment to section 27(2)(b help provinces and municipalities to manage cash flows in the event of budget delays? On slides 26 and to 29, I note that the FFC made recommendations regarding improved grants and a reduction of indirect transfers, which seems to me to be reasonable and sound advice. Why did Treasury reject the FFC's advice? Coming to slide 31 on that topic, can Treasury account for the recovering of funds in cases of poor conditional grant performance, or in cases where municipalities use grants, for example, to pay salaries instead of developing infrastructure. Coming to, I just want to scroll down, the Appropriations Bill, the appropriation of money for requirements of state. What mechanisms are in place to address unauthorized, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure by government components? And also on that topic, what accountability measures exist to prevent misuse of reallocated funds, especially where misuse is a buzzword, and which is something that we need to prevent. Coming to provisional allocations and pressures, what strategies are in place to manage the impact of anticipated spending pressures mentioned by the Minister during the tabling of the budget? I haven't heard that one or the answer to that yet. On the public sector pension and related payments, one issue that is of concern to myself is the powers of the Minister. Now, this bill enables the Minister of Finance to amend the schedule via clause 2. Why is this power not vested in Parliament directly, and how will transparency be guaranteed? I'm of the opinion that these kind of powers should be limited, to say the least. And then I'm going to comment and on the measures taken in respect of retired magistrates. Being an ex-magistrate myself and being a current commissioner of the Magistrates Commission, I welcome this proposed expense. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Brett. Honorable Ndlovu.
Thanks, our chairperson, and greetings to the Deputy Minister and the National Treasury team and my colleagues on the platform. I think, Chair, I'm covered by my other members. Only two few questions they've asked this. On the slide 4, how does Treasury evaluate the efficiency of capital and financial assets expenditure? The other one on the delegation and authorization. How is the accountability? I'm not sure it was asked by another members there, but is how is accountability maintained when powers and delegated to National Treasury employees? How is accountability maintained when powers are delegated to National Treasury employees? Have there been instances where delegated decisions were reversed? Thank you, Chair. I think others, they've been asked by honorable members.
Thank you, Honorable Ndlovu. Honorable Ryder.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and appreciation to Honorable Ndlovu for giving me some of her time. Chair, appreciation to the Deputy Minister and to Treasury for the information shared this morning. I'm sure as we unpack the budget over the next couple of weeks, there will be more questions arising, but I want to focus today on the Division of Revenue Bill a little bit more strongly, noting that the NCOP is in the area. And so I have a number of questions. The first relates to the Eskom, the debts owed to Eskom, and the relief that was offered to municipalities to manage that backlog of debt, which is obviously crowding out current service delivery and forcing current residents to pay for the sins of the past. It's common cause that I think 80% of the municipalities that find themselves in difficulties have been unable to meet the fairly onerous conditions of that debt relief package that was offered. Is Treasury considering any adaptations or further relief or a review of the original conditions and packages that were that were offered to the municipalities. Chair, the next question relates to the local municipalities' ability to generate their own revenue and ability or inability to collect that. And I've noted recently Treasury has started indicating that local government share of the overall fiscus, so not local government gets more or less 9.4 to 9.6% of the national fiscus. But when one considers their own revenue generation capacities, that increases up to almost 20% of monies that are spent. But that really, I think, is on billing and not necessarily on collection. So can Treasury give us an indication of how local governments are faring in terms of their collection and their abilities to implement credit control measures while balancing that obviously with constitutional needs? And are there any suggestions that are being discussed? I do know that the white paper on local government is currently being put together, formulated. Maybe Treasury can give us some insight into their inputs in terms of that. At the same time, I think a related matter, of course, is the mandate creep that local government is finding. I think it's generally across government that mandates tend to creep as community expectations exceed what is constitutionally mandated or what is laid down. But I think local government bears the brunt of mandate creep with the issues, and certainly in my province, informal settlements as a result of high degrees of urbanization that are happening, and the massive impact of land settlement, not using the available infrastructure, going outside of the urban edge, etc. Has Treasury got any ideas of how to mitigate this going forward? And have there been any steps taken in the current division of revenue to address such matters? And of course, to review as well the grants that are paid to local municipalities and to provinces to ensure that services can be provided to those that need it. And then a question that kind of cuts across, I guess, the appropriation bill and the division of revenue and to both of the other spheres of government. What are the incentives, financial incentives or budgetary incentives offered to departments, provinces and municipalities who financially perform well in terms of a raft of things like local municipalities, but also in terms of their financial performance, their ability to spend, their audit outcomes, and of course the outcomes of their predetermined objectives. Are there any financial budgetary incentives that are offered? Because I think, and are these being considered? Certainly, because I think that obviously monetary incentives, budget incentives for top performance is a big incentive that can be offered to encourage people to stick to the rules, adhere to processes, and ensure that they have decent outcomes. If that's financially incentivized, it's going to enforce good behavior. I think Honourable Brits has touched on the direct and indirect grants. So I think Treasury knows that this is one of my big issues. Unfortunately, the movement to indirect grants continues, and that is a little disappointing. I do know Treasury and the FFC have both voiced their opposition to indirect grants and a preference for direct grants, but of course that then ties in with the ability of provinces to deliver. Perhaps we can have a chat on that. Referring to my own province, Gauteng, the impact of e-tolls, crowding out normal roads maintenance and new construction. How long does Treasury foresee that this impact is going to happen? Driving on the roads, and I mentioned it in committee yesterday, so some of our colleagues might be a bit bored by my venting, but certainly the road maintenance on provincial roads in Gauteng has certainly taken a knock as monies are used to rather pay the fairly nasty agreement that was reached just before the elections. My last question, Chair, is just MIG, Municipal Infrastructure Grant. I noticed that there have been some updates to what it can be spent on, and maybe Treasury can just give us an overview so that we can ensure that there's kind of a universal understanding, because municipal infrastructure grant is an important enabler of catalytic development that then has an economic consequence for local municipalities, certainly in areas where there's historically been a problem. I am very chuffed to see that many municipalities are now using more of this for maintenance, but perhaps just an update on the regulations around municipal infrastructure grants would be very, very helpful to me. That would help us to ensure that people are properly informed in municipalities so that we can get out of the old mindsets and start to adapt to the latest regulations. Chair, I'll leave it at that, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ryder. I see the hand of Honorable Siwisa. Honorable Siwisa, I'm going to give you not more than 2 minutes to come back because you had your bite. And when you closed, you said you will come back, and I did not reprimand you from that point. Less than 2 minutes to make your point, Honorable Siwisa.
Okay, no, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. No, it's only the Chair. I think there are people that are watching the proceedings, but Chair, the question that has been forwarded to me is to ask, taking into consideration what's happening in the Eastern Cape right now and the floods and the damages that are happening, how is the disaster or the environmental changes due to the rains that are happening in the Eastern Cape, especially in Umtata, going to affect the appropriation bill, especially when it comes to corporate governance, human settlement, health, roads and transports? So how is the disaster that the people of Eastern Cape are experiencing right now going to affect the appropriation bill, Chair? That's the question I wanted to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Siwisa. Deputy Minister and Mekhaureko, over to the National Treasury with the responses to members' issues raised.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me firstly thank the committee for the robust set of questions that we received and for the detailed nature of the questions as well. As I said to you in the past, Chair, I always appreciate coming to this committee because we, while we get grilled on the details, and I appreciate that this committee takes a robust approach to oversight. Honorable Siwisa, I'll start with yours. In terms of the mechanisms around unauthorized expenditure, what affects how this all gets approved, I will ask the Treasury team to answer the technical detail on unauthorized expenditure and how that works, and the mechanisms to reallocate rollover expenses, reallocating rollovers as well. And what can we do to reduce unspent funds? I'll also ask the Treasury to do that. I think you made an important point around the fact that local government is underperforming, and you made the point that local government doesn't necessarily know how to deal with revenue as well as corruption issues. And I've made a strong note of your point on Sol Plaatje, and I will what I will do is speak to the IGR team so that within the next period of time, after we get through the budget process, I will visit Sol Plaatje municipality myself, and I will let you know when I'm going out there as well, so that we can get on top of that particular issue. When it comes to rural municipalities and how will we assist, we assist municipalities through a whole variety of mechanisms. We have regular engagements. They are delegated and non-delegated municipalities. The delegated ones are the ones that report to the provincial treasuries, and non-delegated reports to national treasury. It's mainly the metros. There are others. There are 3 municipalities under national intervention: Lekwa, which is a rural municipality. There's Enoch and Gijima in the Eastern Cape, and of course there's Mangaung. So we do indirect assistance, we do technical assistance, and then of course, when they are placed under national intervention together with COGTA, we work on those. In terms of until the 31st, how will money be spent? We've got Advocate MP MP van Schoor on here from the Treasury who can give them the technical detail, but effectively up until the passage of a new budget, and the PFMA requires us to pass one by the 31st of July, departments are constrained to 40% of the previous year's budgets, and then 10% once they've reached that 40%, 10% per month until such time as a budget is passed. So unlike the United States and other countries, in South Africa, you won't have a government shutdown. What you will have is a situation where departments are constrained to 40% of last year's expenditure, then 10% per month until such time as Parliament is able to pass a budget. And so that risk does not exist for national departments. And that is how the PFMA enables that. With regards to the point around allocations, the social cluster, and did we decrease it and so on, I just want to take the member through some of the allocations relative to inflation. So inflation is forecasted 4.1% over the medium term. Basic education will go up by 5.4%. Social protection will go up by 4.9%. Economic development and infrastructure goes up by 8.2% over the medium term. We've put this as on page 30 of the budget review, Chairperson, so the members can look that up. And so there, while there are reductions elsewhere or increases below inflation, they're not on frontline services generally. And so what we have done, budgeting is about choices, is choosing frontline services and economic infrastructure. Of course, there are areas we would like to do more in, and there are things that the Treasury and the government must do more to support. But this is in this tight fiscal environment, what we have to make choices on. How does National Treasury decide when to make an appropriation? There's a budget bid process. We get bids from the various departments. Those are evaluated, but I will ask the DDG for Public Finance, Ulrika Britton, to please go through that process and take the committee through how that works. Have we ever stopped an appropriation? There have been circumstances in the past. Most recently, last year, we stopped in December, Chairperson and members. We discovered that a whole lot of water boards were about to go bankrupt. Two, in fact, was I think Val Central and Makhali's Water. And what we then had to do, Chairperson, is notify these municipalities that we were going to stop their equitable share because they were not paying their water boards. We did that. It was a bit of a controversial move, but it was necessary to ensure that potentially up to 5 million people did not lose access to clean running water at all, and prevent the collapse of water boards. So we wrote to them, we notified them we were going to. We then had to withhold their equitable share. And we paid it out in January on condition, in December and January, that they paid their water boards. We paid a tranche, and then when they paid their water boards, we paid over the rest. So that's one example of when we had to stop an appropriation. There are others, and I'm sure the team can come in on that. And then Honorable Majola asks, do we have any restrictions on what we can spend in terms of cost of employees? Look, it is not ideal to have excessively high cost of employees. It is not ideal that your salary bill grows above inflation every year and so on, but there is no legal restriction. What you've got to do, of course, is balance critically infrastructure needs. You've got to balance services, and so you've got to right size and make sure you've got a public service that is fit for purpose and streamlined to deliver that. But I'll ask the Treasury team to comment further as well. In terms of provisional allocations, and I think the member asked specifically about the SRD grant. The SRD grant was introduced specifically as a temporary relief measure, and it has been renewed by Cabinet year after year after year. So it remains in provisional allocations and within the fiscal framework as part of the budgeting process, so that when we do put together any budgets, if Cabinet approves the continuation of the SRD grant, the Treasury is in a position to do so. But in terms of the technical detail of the provisional allocations, I will then also ask Public Finance to please come in on that, and IGR. In terms of investment in provinces, all provinces have needs, and why does the Western Cape get the Rapid School Build program? It basically is we fund partly on shovel-ready projects, and so the moment any province is able to demonstrate that they are able to go on shovel-ready, then that enables us to fund some of these things as well. So it really is up to the provinces to do their planning correctly, and then they can take advantage of the infrastructure spending available. But it was always within the baseline for us to be able to fund these things, and it's all provinces that are able to take advantage of this, provided they do their planning correctly. In terms of the spending pressures and the legal instruments, I think I'll ask the Treasury how those come about. It's the Office of the Chief Justice, the Royal Households, and the National Dialogue, and so on. In terms of data to determine how we prioritize education and healthcare, it is the prioritization of education and healthcare is both because they are frontline services, and we have multiple data points. One of the data points is that in the last year, 9,000 healthcare workers across the country had left the system, but due to high levels of accruals in provinces and other problems, they were not able to put in the necessary staff to replace them, for example. And so those are parts of the data points that we use to make the determination. Similarly, there's a lot of pressure in the education system and teachers. There's been a lot of, in the public domain, lots of pressure as well around preventing retrenchments of teachers, which is very important. We do want class sizes to be smaller, and we want every child in South Africa to get a quality education. And so there are multiple data points about how we came to that as well. In terms of economic growth and investing in growth, it's been since MTBPS last year the objective of the National Treasury to improve the composition of government expenditure from consumption towards investment. And so if you go to page 30 of the budget review that we've tabled with the budgets, you'll see that economic development is the fastest growing line item over the medium term. It's 8.2% on average per year compounded. And economic regulation and infrastructure specifically grows at 11.1% per year over the medium term on average. And so it is this particular budget, starting with the MTBPS last year, is biased towards improving the composition of government expenditure from consumption to investment to invest in growth. In terms of the PES formula and its components, particularly poverty, I think Wendy Farrow, who works in this, is on the meeting, so she'll be able to answer that from the IGR team at Treasury. In terms of debt service costs and the breakdown of our debts, Chairperson, 90% of South Africa's debt is rand denominated. 10% is forex denominated, predominantly dollars. I'm not sure if we have anyone from the asset and liability team, but they can enrich what I'm about to say. But the strategy has always been to keep debt in rand denominated and to minimize FX borrowing or forex borrowing. To obviously prevent a sovereign debt crisis, to maintain our sovereignty, all those things that are very, very important. And we take the strategy primarily of issuing debt through the bond market in rands, and we auction every Tuesday. And so anyone who is interested in buying South African rand denominated government debt is able to do so through a bond auction. And that obviously the market then determines the yields and the risk premium and so on. In terms of was there any restructuring done, I'll let the team, the Treasury team, get into the details of that. But obviously, the issue with bonds is that you end up with redemptions, and when the redemptions come due, you either need to repay the capital amount or issue fresh bonds. And I'll let the team go through that. And if we can renegotiate, every piece of government debt eventually has to be settled because the redemptions come due. And so we do have to settle that at that point when, if it's a 5-year, 7-year, 10-year, 15, 20 or 30-year SAGB, we've got to then settle the debt. Then the member also asked, Member Majola asked about the metros and made the point that how are we planning to retain the status of the metros because of the scale of the DK. And I think he made the tongue-in-cheek point, but quite rightly, that the scale of DK makes them look like rural municipalities. And I think the point is taken very strongly. Honorable Member and Honorable Chair, what we have embarked upon through the Intergovernmental Relations team is what we call Metro Trading Services Reform. And I'll ask both the IGR team and Ulrika Britain to come in as champions of this particular process. And we're starting with water, and we are aware that in our metros there have been severe water outages. Being from Gauteng, last week, Chair was in Gauteng. I didn't have water on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. I had water on Saturday and Sunday, and then Monday didn't have water again. Then I returned to Cape Town for Parliament, my parliamentary duties here. So I know exactly what the member is talking about. So the Metro Trading Services reform effectively shifts the way the metros deliver services, core services, to a utility model where you will effectively ring-fence the revenues that come in from the services to do forward planning of the service. Firstly, pay your water boards on time and your big utilities, Eskom and others. Invest in your delivery mechanisms. In the case of water, it is your piping, it is your purification, etc., etc. And invest in the maintenance of those services. And only if at that point there are surpluses can the surpluses be redistributed. What happens right now is people pay their bills in the metros and all municipalities, and the money just gets spent across all things rather than keeping their services on the go. And so that's part of it, but I'll ask the team to enrich what we are doing in metros and metro trading services. Honorable Swartz, you asked also about the wasteful and fruitless expenditure, and I'll ask the team to get into that in detail. On empowering municipal officials, there's lots of programs. By law, every municipal manager, CFO, Section 56 manager has to complete a series of MFMA compliance modules, which was designed by the National Treasury. And they all have to do a portfolio of evidence and so on as part of that course before they can serve at that level. And that's part of one of the many reforms the Treasury has put in over the years to make sure that we have officials who are competent and capable at the high level. But even if you solve that problem, the middle management in municipalities also must be able to execute their functions. And of course, municipalities, even if you put in the best people, if the people underneath them are not capable and there are problems there, then you're going to run into failures of delivery, which is, I think, part of what we are seeing as well. And of course, if the politicians at municipal level politicize the administration and don't respect the political administrative boundary, which is also what we are seeing in municipalities, then you will end up with service failures, which is what we're seeing unfold now. So even with the capable people, if you don't respect the boundaries, if politicians are interfering at administration, such as tenders and so on, you end up with service collapse. Then Honorable Swart, you asked, how does the DORA address the constraints of the March and May budgets? Critically, both the March and the May budget try to do a couple of things. The first is to prevent failures of healthcare and infrastructure delivery in provinces, and this budget continues to increase expenditure in that space. The third thing that we want to do quite critically is change the composition of and invest in infrastructure, and this budget does continue that, albeit at a reduced rate in the absence of any major tax measures that we are able to table as Parliament has told us. In terms of reviewing revenue-raising instruments in provinces and municipalities, part of that is constitutional, part of that is legal. I will ask the Treasury team to get into that. But the reality is that I think the message that the Budget 1.0 and 2.0 at a political level has given us is that the South African citizens have said that they do not want government to take too much more money out of their pockets, and we must sort ourselves out first. And national government is now undertaking a spending review and ghost employee audits and so on. And I think what needs to happen at provinces before we start speaking about revenue raising instruments and so on is for them to also get their own fiscal houses in order, particularly at the local government space, to remove and reduce and eliminate duplication, eliminate waste, eliminate corruption and fraud, as Member Sindiswa rightly pointed out, before we start speaking about creating revenue-raising instruments, because I think that the politics of the country has taught us a hard lesson through budgets 1.0 and 2.0, and even at a local level, we must be careful not to create instruments when their own financial situation leaves much to be desired. We have provinces where you have entire there aren't a single municipality in some provinces with a clean audit. So I think before we can even go down that path, we have got to look specifically at then how do we get their house in order? In terms of getting the municipal debtors book sorted and credit control, we've got to start depoliticizing credit control. So it's easy for us to say credit control and so on, but at the local level, local politicians, of course, want credit control, but not in their own communities. And I think we've got to sensitize people to the fact that credit control is something that needs to be done for the long-term viability of service delivery. And that's part of the process. But I think the other part of the process is proper indigent management. And we have many, many municipalities that we provide a full appropriation from the Treasury through the DORA to make sure that poor households are catered for. And we use Stats SA data, because if we used the data from their own indigent registers, we'd only be paying for a few hundred people rather than tens or hundreds of thousands. So indigent management is going to become an increasingly important part of what municipalities need to start doing properly, and to get all their indigents registered, and also to educate people, saying we're providing free basic services. This is what you get for free for water. This is what you get for free for electricity. This is how you manage your consumption and so on. It's an important part of what municipalities should be doing. I'm aware of a municipality in KwaZulu-Natal that has gone into their poor communities and given amnesty to everyone who has had an illegal connection, saying, if you register as an indigent, and went and properly educated the members of that community, I don't want to speak about the specifics of the municipalities, and taught the community that this is what it means to register for indigency. This is why it's a bad idea to steal electricity and have an illegal connection. This is how we connect you legally. And it's produced some good results for that particular municipality. And so it really shows what can be done when there's political will. Debt service costs. At what point does the Treasury consider debt fiscally unsustainable? Not sure if we've got asset liability on here, but basically, when you look at global economies and debt, it's not necessarily about your percentage of debt to GDP. It's about the percentage of your budget that goes to servicing that debt. So primarily, when you consider debt service costs, you must look at how much of your budget is used to pay for servicing your debt. And if you look at the United States, it's about 14%, and it's fairly low. We're at 21%, nearly 22% of our budget being used in debt service costs, our consolidated budget. And so that is why the strategy, Honorable Swart, is to run a primary surplus and a debt stabilizing primary budget surplus, so that we borrow less and less over the coming years, and so that we can begin to start balancing out the budget. South Africa's had a structural deficit of 5% of GDP approximately since 2009 that has led us to this situation. And that is why running the primary surplus is so important. Then, Honorable Swart, you asked, is 9.7% adequate for local government under austerity? I want to make a point. The definition of austerity is that when a government reaches a point where its fiscus is severely constrained, it begins to cut back on social expenditure. It would cut, for example, grants and no longer provide grants. And we saw this during the financial crisis in Greece and other places. The austerity of the United Kingdom in the 1980s, for example, those programs, and they cut social services, free education, free healthcare, and so on. We have not done that. We have not been engaged in acts of austerity because we have not ended or eliminated or even reduced the social wage, which consumes 60% of the budget. We have been engaged in fiscal consolidation. The local sphere of government is the only sphere of government that can raise a large amount of own revenue. And so when you look at the transfers that we do, the 9.7%, but then you need to keep in mind we do a whole lot of conditional grants and so on as well, that we actually provide local government with a lot of resources, a lot of supports. Provinces do as well. And so the question really is, how do you get the management in local government to function within the resources they have to focus and deliver their core services, rather than creating undue spending pressures themselves? In terms of what performance metrics we'll use to assess ECD, I'll let the Treasury team answer that. And then what do we do with donor funding withdrawals such as PEPFAR? I know I did see Dr. Mark Letcher from the public finance team. I'm not sure if he's still on, but you can get into detail. But let me say this, because there are also multiple questions that have been asked about PEPFAR and the PEPFAR funding withdrawal and so on. South Africa paid 100% for its own antiretrovirals. The PEPFAR program wasn't paying for the medication. So we are able to provide medication on our own budget to every single HIV positive person in South Africa, which I think is a fine thing that we are able to do and have always been able to do. PEPFAR was providing the add-on services, hard to reach groups, people in deep rural communities running specific clinics, LGBT communities, and so on. And they were providing a lot of support through NGOs and their own privately run, NGO run rather, primary healthcare facilities to reach those hard to reach groups to make sure that we contain HIV infections in a country such as ours. And that is the gap that we need to plug with PEPFAR, and then assessment is underway, and I'm sure that Dr. Bletcher can go into the details there. Then let me get to the next batch of questions. My apologies. On the breakdown of funding to do with healthcare accruals, I'll ask the Treasury to provide that to Honorable Masai. Honorable Nxumalo asked about the formula. I think Wendy will be able to answer that. Wendy Farrow from IGR. And will we use the new data in the MTBPS? I'll also ask Wendy to please answer that. What outcomes we're targeting with the grants? I'll ask the IGR team to please answer that as well. And then this is similar on the rollovers and unspent funds. I'll ask the Treasury team to please go into the technical detail there. On what support we give to municipalities, I think I've already answered that from Honorable Brits, but I know the Treasury can provide more. Section 27(2)(b), I'll ask the Treasury team to get into that. And then on the FFC's advice, I also the Treasury team to please respond. Mechanisms to address unallocated, fruitless and wasteful expenditure and misuse of reallocated funds. I'll also ask the Treasury to please provide the legal detail there. And then on clause 2 and the schedule in terms of clause 2, I'll also let the legal team of the Treasury answer that. And thank you for welcoming the bill as a former magistrate yourself, Honorable Brits. Honorable Ndlovu asked, in terms of Treasury, how do we ensure accountability is maintained when powers are delegated to Treasury employees? And has there ever been withdrawal of delegations? I'm not sure who can provide historical detail on that. Certainly since I've been there, I haven't seen any withdrawal of delegations in the last couple of months that I've been in the Treasury. Let me say this, that the Treasury has, through the Corporate Services Department, a very strong performance management system internally. And so everybody is measured against a series of KPIs and KPAs. And that ends up informing the department's annual performance plan, which is, of course, tabled to Parliament as well. Honorable Rider, on the Eskom debt relief bill, and you have said in the past, both to me directly and to the Treasury, that you consider the conditions too high. I do want to say that I do think that when you consider that these municipalities in many cases are getting away with effectively not paying their historic Eskom debt, and now we're giving them a get out of jail free card by saying, if you meet some conditions and if you keep your current account up to date, we will be able to write off your historical debt, is a form of moral hazard. And that's why conditions have to be strict. Because we know from, for example, SOE bailouts over the last 10 years that it can become a runaway train if you don't have strict conditions, and people treat the public person, the Treasury, as a piggy bank when that's not what we are. The Treasury has to engage in an act of allocative efficiency and not create moral hazard in public finance. And so that is that. But I'll ask the team to speak about whether we're considering adaptations and so on. In terms of how's local government faring in collection and credit control, in the post-COVID period, very badly. Municipalities are routinely used to collect 90% revenue and not getting to those points anymore, and in lots of municipalities much lower. And that is part due to a combination of factors. Obviously, the state of the economy and low growth is part of the situation. Households are squeezed. But the other part is the political will to execute credit control, and that is a problem. In terms of mandate creep, the white paper review is underway, and as you rightly pointed out, that is in place. In terms of other budgetary incentives for people who perform well and reward good behavior, I think I'll also ask the IGR team to get into the details on that. And then Gauteng, the freeway improvement project and the debt, it was included in this particular budget, and there is a situation where the Gauteng government pays a portion, the National Treasury pays a portion towards that, to settling that, and I think it is over the next 4 years, if I'm not mistaken, but I'll ask the team to respond to that. And Gauteng Roads Department, of course, and the provincial roads, they need to do the necessary planning there. I'm afraid we'll have to let them comment on that. And then the new regulation on municipal infrastructure grants, will let the Treasury team answer as well. And then lastly, Honorable Sivisa asked about disasters and the environmental issues, and particularly with flooding in the Eastern Cape at the moment, and how does this affect the appropriation bill? So in the budget, you'll see that there's an amount called the contingency reserve. And the contingency reserve is in place for any unforeseen things that may happen to us, including disasters. And so the contingency reserve is one of the critical mechanisms that we need to put into place, and that we have in place, to fund matters such as what is happening in the Eastern Cape at the moment. And obviously there's a provincial disaster response, and when that's triggered, then it triggers the necessary process and systems, and then we will evaluate the need to use disaster funds, and then if needs be, the contingency reserve to deal with that. So that is how it is in place. So it won't affect the appropriations bill fundamentally, because we do run a contingency reserve for those circumstances over and above the monies in COGTA and provinces and municipalities to respond to disasters. So with that, Chairperson, let me hand over to the Treasury team to answer questions. I think I know that the DDG for IGR, Okhale, had to attend to another meeting, so I'll ask my DDGs to starting with Public Finance. Ulrika Britton, if you can please come in, and then we can hand over to MP, and then the chief directors can come in after that.
Okay, thank you, DM, and thank you, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable members. I am just going to deal with some of the kind of general issues, and then we will leave it for the sector-specific things. The Public Finance Chief Directors will come in. So just in relation to unauthorized, irregular, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure, I mean, the Public Finance Management Act is quite clear about accounting officers' responsibilities in relation to preventing unauthorized expenditure, irregular expenditure, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and the accountability mechanisms that then lie with the accounting officer and the relevant executive authority are provided for in the PFMA. What the Treasury does do around all of this is that we do provide the regulations and the norms, and setting the norms and standards in how this gets reported and accounted for. But fundamentally, the way it is designed within the PFMA is that where this may be deemed financial misconduct, it is up to the accounting officer of a relevant vote. And if it is the accounting officer who is deemed to have committed the unauthorized, irregular, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure, it would be up to that executive authority to deal with. The other thing that I thought was quite important maybe to deal with is in relation to, there are two issues. The first, just in addition to what DM Sarupen has mentioned on disasters, we do have in this, both the appropriation bill and in the division of revenue bill, that makes provision for immediate relief grants and immediate relief allocation. So for example, on the human settlements vote, we have the emergency housing program. That would mean that the department could spend money almost immediately in the Eastern Cape. The difference between the money, the emergency housing program money that sits with the Department of Human Settlements, and the immediate response grants that sits on the vote of the Department of Cooperative Governance, is that you don't need, for the emergency housing, you don't need to wait for a classification or declaration of a disaster like we do in case of the immediate response grants that we have on the vote of the Department of Cooperative Governance. So there is money available. The fact that these bills have not been passed, and given that this money was appropriated in last year's budget, Section 29 of the PFMA will allow those departments to spend money immediately, and they should be able to respond immediately to that. then just in addition to adding around kind of on just the financial incentives to departments who perform well, which is what Honorable Ryder had raised. So Honorable Ryder, it's expected that departments do well, just like it's expected that the Treasury does well. This is what we get paid for. We get paid to perform. So, but notwithstanding all of that, we do have various performance measures that sits within some of the grants, and the urban development financing grant that Honorable Numalo was referring to is a performance, or has a component that is performance based. So we do have those. We do have, similarly in the public transport network grant, a performance component in all of that kind of helps drive with innovation and all of that, so that those service delivery institutions are able to get some flexibility around how they are able to kind of bring in the innovations, the new way of doing things that would allow them to exceed their existing performances. Just the last thing I wanted to add, DM, was on GFIP. So the agreement is a 5-year, has a 5-year payment period. So you are right, it is for the next 4 years, because it started in March 2024. So the existing arrangements that we have around phase 1 of GFIP is a 5-year agreement, but there are components within the broader planning, and that sits within the Gauteng's Integrated Transport Master Plan for 2025 that requires Gauteng to think about what needs to happen in relation to phase 2 and phase 3. The phase 2 and phase 3 are on the provincial road reserve, so the expectation that the planning and the financial and the financing of that will sit with provinces. Thank you very much.
Thank you, DM. I'll try to answer the questions that you requested me to attend to. The first question relates to expenditure pending the adoption of the Appropriation Division of Revenue Bill. As you indicated, there are percentages in section 29. The first 4 months is 45%, and thereafter it's 10%. But there is an overall limit that it may not be more than the total amount that was appropriated in the previous financial year. And then also it's limited by that it can only be spent for the same services for which appropriations were made in the previous financial year. Then this provision also applies to provinces, provided that they adopted their own legislation that would treat such expenditure as direct charges. We did recently check, I think most provinces, if not all, have such legislation in place. Then there was a question in relation to the proposed amendment to 27 of the Division of Revenue Bill, which the main aim of that provision is to mirror the provision in the PFMA, because the one that was tabled earlier in the year only provided for 45% for the first 4 months. So we now proposing that it should also have the 10% for subsequent months of the year. That provision enabled Treasury then to transfer the equitable share to provinces up to the 45% for the first 4 months, as similar to local government. But in the case of local government, it will only kick in from the 1st of July according to their financial year. And it also applied to conditional grants, so it's not limited to the equitable share. Then there was a question in relation to the if there's limitation on the spending of compensation of employees during this period where there's no appropriation bill. There is no limitation because COE is an item that's been spent on in the previous financial year, so spending may continue during this period. Then I just want to add something on the stopping of appropriations. There is a provision in previous appropriation acts and also in the current bill before the committee in clause 4 that allows the minister where he imposed conditions on expenditure that he may stop that appropriation if there's non-compliance with the condition. And maybe my colleagues from public finance can give examples where that was done. So that's in addition to the example that the DM gave on the equitable share. Just then briefly on the delegations under the Appropriation Act, I think it is important to understand it's quite labor incentive, some of the provisions in the bill. So it will practically be not for the minister possible to attend to, for instance, requests for viaments under clause 5 of the bill, and therefore it's been practiced to delegate that power, the minister, to the DDG Public Finance, but he can impose conditions, limitations, and reporting if required. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate van Schoor. Are there any further DDGs who would like to respond around the platform, or can I start handing the chief directors?
DM, good morning to yourself. It's Marum from the Budget Office. Good morning to yourself. Good morning to the Honorable Chair and the Honorable members and colleagues on the platform. I think there were just two questions that I needed to respond to, the Honorable Chair. There was a question around a provisional allocation and what these allocations are. And we want to indicate that these are allocations that we normally set aside to deal with specific issues. And they are made available once the departments of local government would have demonstrated the capacity to spend those monies. And also the ones we would have agreed with the national sector departments around the allocation mechanisms for those allocations. And I mean, this also relates to the question that was raised around the spending pressures. I mean, part of what the provision that we made in this allocation was monies that has been earmarked for frontline services in education and health to deal with spending pressures in compensation of employees, as well as the accruals in goods and services in health, and also dealing with other matters, I think, as already indicated by our colleagues in ECD, and as well as the employment of unemployed doctors. So that's on provisional allocations. And then there was also a question that was raised around the fiscal sustainability of debt service cost. And the question was that at what point does the Treasury regard it as being fiscally unsustainable? And what are the strategies for that we put in place to deal with that? And I think for us, I mean, once your debt service cost becomes the second spending item by function, which is currently the case, and it takes 22% of the revenue that you are generating. It increases from 8% of consolidated spending in 2008 and 9 to around 17%, thus crowding out spending in other areas. For us, that's where it becomes a problem, which currently, in fact, it is a problem. And part of the strategies that were put in place, which has been presented in this budget, was around growing our primary surplus and ensuring that we narrow our budget deficit over time. And by doing so, what will happen is that our gross borrowing requirements will start to reduce once we reduce the budget deficit, which will ultimately affect our debt stocks and the debt service cost over time. So our strategy is around, it's anchored around primary balance and ensuring that over time we are able to reduce that or narrow that budget deficit, because budget deficit is the main driver currently of our gross borrowing requirements. So it is important that we try and reduce that. And by extension, what that means is that moving forward, we will no longer be funding any spending pressure or spending needs through additional borrowings, because we just don't have the space to do so. And we've also, as part of this conversation around the strategies in dealing with our debt moving forward, I mean, we've also published a document on fiscal anchors, which is centered around us moving towards setting some rules moving forward on how we will want to manage this problem, which will include the involvement of Parliament as well as the legislature. So that document is available in our website for consultation with the broader stakeholders. Thank you, DM, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Marumo. Just that members are aware, Marumo is acting as the head of the budget office while Mr. Edgar Sishi is on sabbatical. Can I ask from the IGR team for someone to come in before I hand over to the chief directors in those various units? We haven't had a response from the IGR team yet.
Good morning. Unfortunately, Khalid Rakwe, the DDG, had to leave for another very important meeting, and she asked me to direct the questions. So if I can ask Michael Ramabi, that's the Acting Chief Director, Provincial Budget Analysis, to deal with the provincial questions. And then we've moved to local government questions. If I can ask Jan Hatting to come in and deal with the local government performance questions, and then I'll deal with the rest. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Can the team come in, please?
Thanks, and a very good morning to honorable members, the Deputy Minister and colleagues. My name is Michael Ramabi, as Wendy has announced, the Acting Chief Director for Provincial Budget Analysis. In terms of the specific questions relating to provinces that were asked, so the first one, I think it was from Honorable Sibisa, that was talking about surrenders to National Treasury, and then what those surrenders will mean. That will mean no service delivery. And then what one must say is that when we look at the surrenders, I mean, even if we look at the trends from the 2020-21 financial year, I mean, we see big monies were actually surrendered during the time of COVID, because it was in 2020-21, 2.4 billion, 21-22, 3.3, 22-23, 3.4. And from 23-24, we started to see those surrenders going down, like it was 923 million rand in 23-24. And based on last financial year, the preliminary numbers are showing that provinces will only surrender 626 million. So this indicates that spending in provinces is actually improving. So those big surrenders, as I said, were surrendered during the time of COVID. But in terms of now the surrenders and how we handle that process, we handle it as part of the rollover process. So firstly, when we stop funds, Section 18 of the Division of Revenue Act allows us to do that in instances where there is persistent breach of the Division of Revenue Act, in situations where we anticipate that there's going to be substantial underspending of grants, or if there's a function that is moving from the provincial sphere of government to local government. Those are the conditions under which we can stop an allocation to a province. But when we then reallocate, the things that we look at is the capacity of the department that we allocate money to spend. That ought to be demonstrated. And then it is also on condition that that money that is reallocated will be spent in that financial year. And if it is not spent, it should be committed to an identifiable project. Those are the conditions under which we can reallocate. And then, of course, linking to the question that Honorable Numalo has asked, avoiding the misuse of those reallocated funds. So what we'll normally do, as I indicated, firstly, that it will be based on the capacity of the receiving department to spend. And we do monitor, obviously, on a monthly basis. We do conduct infrastructure site visits. And then obviously in instances where we suspect that there might be a possible misuse, so we do ask for beneficiary reports where we can see where the money was allocated. We engage with the departments on an ongoing basis. And then on the issue of accruals, so I think the accruals, we have actually seen them increasing. And I think when the provinces entered into the 2024-25 financial year, they entered with a balance of just over 36 billion rand. And then that was an increase of 6.7 billion rand from the previous year. So in terms of the strategy that provinces have to actually manage this, so number one, what we have always and consistently advised provinces to do is to avoid overcommitting their budgets, number one, and two, obviously procuring in line with the cash flow projections and the budget availability. And they should prioritize the repayment of long outstanding accruals. And we do encourage them to enter into payment arrangements with creditors in instances where they owe them big amounts of money. They enter into those agreements to pay them over time. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Jan, if you can go ahead.
Thanks, DM. Honourable members. I'm Jan Hudson from the National Treasury, also in the Intergovernmental Relations Division. I'm responsible for the monitoring and oversight of municipal budgets. So, Chairperson, we do share the sentiment of the committee on the poor performance of local government, generally speaking. The honourable members, I'm sure, is aware that the Treasury annually produce a number of publications, which I think is fundamental, Chairperson, to the committee's oversight responsibilities. In broad terms, our last State of Local Government report, we have concluded that there's 168 municipalities that's in distress, and there's about 96 municipalities that have not tabled funded budgets in terms of Section 18 of the MFMA. One of the challenges and the specific example that the Deputy Minister have responded to, Honourable Chair, in the Sol Plaatje case is the appointment of chief financial officers or municipal managers. Unfortunately or fortunately, that's the council that make that final determination. And between us and COCTA, we are trying to figure out how in the future we can have a say in that process. There is the competency regulations that the Treasury has issued in order to make sure that people meet at least the minimum standard of being a financial officer or even a municipal manager or even a procurement practitioner. The second issue, Chair, is the broad underperformance in local government. I can summarize that as follow, Honourable Chair. We have observed that planning is one of the issues that municipalities are really struggling, especially long-term planning. And the fact that the budget process, the way it's been designed, the MFMA gives sufficient time for the administration and the council to go through a process. But our observation is that all these things are done at number 99. So the law allows for a 10-month window leading up to the tabling and the adoption of the budget. But I don't think municipalities really take advantage. The second big challenge that undermine performance is the supply chain management practices. And I think this is a common theme, Deputy Minister, in all the Auditor General's report, that on the procurement side, municipalities are not necessarily helping themselves and follow the correct processes in the legislation. We've also observed, Honourable Chair, that project management skills, the ability to look after assets, and the fact that there's not sufficient engineers, given the nature of the service, is another issue. And this is where the Department of Corporative Governance is such an important player, Chair, because they have the MISA instrument, the municipal infrastructure, I can't remember the exact wording, but they've got the entity that's essentially supposed to assist municipalities on asset management also bring capability on infrastructure and engineering skills on board. So I think, Chair, that's broadly as far as the overall performance. The Deputy Minister has spoken about the metros broadly. Chair, I think there's the political instability adds significantly to the performance or the lack of performance that we observed in our metro space. In addition, we have seen a lot of experts that was in the sector has left the metros. So that's added to the problem of instability. And obviously, a new, and it's not new in the local government space, but coalition governments and how that interface with the administration is part of the issues that added to the negative performance that we've observed. As far as municipalities, Honorable Swart, you've asked, how do we deal with municipalities that underspend? So, Chair, if you look at the overall budget of municipalities, the budget that they're currently implementing, it's about 466 billion rand. The slides that Dr. Pakis presented indicate that national government's contribution is 176.8 billion. Equitable shares about 106 billion, and then grants 53.9. So, Honorable Smith, on average, and this is disclosed in the budget documents annually, I would say on average, the underperformance or the underspending with regard to grants is about 2.5 billion rand. It averaged between 2.5 billion rand. So in the broader scheme of things, from a percentage, it may not seem like a lot of money, but we do know as a Treasury that it impacts directly on service delivery to the communities. So, Chair, that brings me to the point about, and Deputy Minister, you did make the point, local government's got extensive tax powers. Unfortunately, what we've observed is as national government invested over a period of time in helping municipalities to improve access to services and to deal with backlogs, that the more we invest, and the amounts that we've invested over time is quite significant, that the more national government invests, the more municipalities, unfortunately, Chair, do not put in effort to collect what legitimately they're supposed to collect. And if you look at our quarterly financial reports that we publish on financial performance and grant performance, as at 31st of March, the amount that municipalities is supposed to collect for services rendered is now standing at 416.1 billion rand. So it's quite a significant amount. And I think this linked to the point the Deputy Minister has made, we need to help municipalities to put in effort to collect firstly the amounts. And the Deputy Minister has indicated that we have Treasury norms and standards, which we've released in terms of one of our circulars, Circular 71. And what we expect municipalities to collect is on average 95%. But unfortunately, as a result of COVID, some municipalities have been in a position to bounce back quite quickly, but others are struggling. And hence, there needs to be much more effort linked to the credit control enforcement, and the Deputy Minister has spoken about. As far as grant management is concerned, honourable members, the moment we detect as part of our monitoring systems, and we have tightened this up quite substantially over time. So, honourable members, we issue 2 budget circulars to municipalities annually. The first one is in early December, and the second one is a week after the national budget. In those circulars, you will see the process, the criteria, and the processes municipalities must go through in order to apply for a rollover. But the way we look at the disclosures in the financial statements, honorable members, this is where we can see if municipalities use grant funding for paying salaries. And the moment we detect that, honorable members, we recall that money as per the powers that's given to the Treasury in the Annual Division of Revenue Act. As far as the ESCOM, I think the Deputy Minister has spoken to the Municipal Debt Relief Program. We have reported to you, honorable members, that 71 municipalities were successful in applying. Broadly speaking, we're busy with a final submission to the Director General to then decide whether or not we're going to continue hosting those municipalities. Unfortunately, and the Deputy Minister has responded already, of the 14 conditions, one is a new condition. All the others is linked to existing practices and existing legislative requirement, Honorable Rider. So it's not new conditions. Unfortunately, our observation is, and the Director General have issued very sharp warning letters to 60 municipalities in December. We have categorized the municipalities in 4 groups, but there's a group of municipalities, Honorable Chair, and there's 14 of them, that we have observed that the debt relief will make no difference, even if a full amount has been written off. So between us, COPTA, SALGA, and the ESCOM team, we have met on a few occasions, and we do get criticized as a Treasury for this program. But the question is, what is the alternative? If this program fails, what is the alternative? And so far, honorable members, I have not received one person that could give me something that we can take forward. What we are going to do is, depending on the decision of the Director General and the Minister, of the 60 municipalities that got final warning letters, we suspect there's going to be about 55 that will be taken off the program, but we are in the process to negotiate with ESCOM that they then take over the electricity function for those specific municipalities. All of this, Honorable Chair, subject to the Director General and the Minister's approval. As far as the unauthorized, irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure, obviously, as part of the Treasury norms, as the Deputy DG Public Finance indicated, there's a disclosure requirement in the annual financial statements. That's the first step. Secondly, Honorable Chair, we have issued a reduction strategy, a document that Treasury has developed, and we've issued that as guidance to all municipalities. And the specific circular that references this is circular MFA Circular 111. It was issued on the 16th of November 2021. The Treasury essentially tried to focus on the 100 highest unauthorized, irregular, wasteful expenditure grouping, but each municipality was meant to table that in council and then put in process practices that can help us to facilitate the reduction of this quite radically. Honorable Chair, I think I can stop there. As indicated in the previous session, perhaps Minister, Deputy Minister, we may want to explore and persuade the honorable members and the Chair that we should have a dedicated session on local government when time permits. Thank you, Deputy Minister, and sorry for a long story.
Thank you, Jan. Wendy, do you want to come in? I think that I don't want to run out of time, Chair, and I don't want to abuse the committee's time.
Yes,
but
I was going to request that you summarize the responses, Deputy Minister, because You have been responding for at least 1 hour, 5 minutes now, and we still have other things to do as members of the committee.
Okay, thanks, Chair. There are only two more things that needed to be responded to. The one is the formula. So I'll ask Wendy to briefly explain the formula and when we're going to bring in the new data and so on for that. And then if I can just on PEPFAR ask Dr. Mark Bletcher to please come in briefly as well on that, and then we'll be done, Chair. So that's the only thing outstanding. So if we can ask Wendy and then Mark to come in that order, please.
Thank you so much. Just with regard to the poverty data, and it's a problem both in the provincial equitable share and the local government equitable share where we use outdated data. One of the key principles to ensure that we ensure equity and equitable allocations amongst the various municipalities and provinces is to use the latest available, official available data. And that is what we're currently using in both the provincial and local government equitable share. As Dr. Pockies indicated, we are working with Stats SA, and they are doing work, particularly to get the data on the income and expenditure survey data updated. And we intend to use it in the 2026 MTF, but that is subject to Stats SA providing that information. But we are regularly engaging with them on this matter. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, honourable members. On the PEPFAR allocations, we have now prepared a recommendation for consideration by the Minister and Director General on the withdrawn PEPFAR allocations in three parts. Firstly, for services in the provinces, secondly, for research, and thirdly, for the National Department. Those are kind of initial allocations under Section 16 emergency allocations. Just to mention on the concern about social grant spending being withdrawn, just as the person who kind of oversees the health budgets, I'm actually extremely relieved that with the reversal of the VAT spending, that we've still been able to retain an additional 20.7 billion for health in the provisional allocations. That's about 6 to 7 billion a year. For a province like Eastern Cape or Western Cape, that's an additional 600 to 700 million rand this year, which can really, really make the difference for those departments. So I think it's really great we've been able to retain those. That's about 8.1 billion for compensation, 9.9 billion for goods, 2.7 million for the post community service doctors, which will employ about 800, which was the shortfall last year. The amount for goods, the 9.9 billion, is about a half of the 21.6 billion accrual. So if that's used well, it could halve the accrual amounts. The SRD grant allocations are on budget this year, and the grant payments started from April. In fact, the Minister could rightfully have asked that the increases with the VAT withdrawals, that the increases on the social grants, for example, the old age grant being 120 rand increase rather than 100 be withdrawn. But in fact, the Minister requested that those increases continue this year, and even the October increases also continue. So that for this year, those increases have all continued, despite the reductions that have been made. Back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think that we have answered the questions to the best of our ability and as comprehensively as we can. So I'll hand back to you and thank the committee for their time and for holding us to account.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Thank you so much for the comprehensive responses. And let me, on behalf of the committee, extend our sincere gratitude for your comprehensive presentations and the valuable engagements on the three proposed bills. These are the bills that are central to the equitable allocation of resources, the effective functioning of government, and the sustainability of our public finances. We really appreciate the continued cooperation with clarity provided by your good selves, Team Treasury. And as part of our constitutional oversight role, the committee will now embark on a series of public hearings to ensure that the budget process remains transparent, inclusive, and responsive to the needs of our people. The details of the next meeting will be shared with all the members by the Secretariat as usual. We look forward to further constructive engagement as we move through the legislative process. Honorable members and support staff, I'm going to request that you remain behind while other colleagues on the platform, provincial legislatures, committees on finance, we really appreciate your participation and you joining our meeting today. We are looking forward to that working relationship between ourselves and your good selves in playing our oversight even in your provinces and municipalities. For that, I will request your good selves, provincial legislatures, and the team from the National Treasury, and any other stakeholder that might be on the platform to can excuse us members of the committee. I'm going to request that we stay behind just to process the 3 sets of minutes that we need to process today. Thank you very much, and your attendance is truly appreciated once again.
Chair, let me just thank the Deputy Minister that we look forward to his visit at the Salt Lake municipality because it's a crisis there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Siwisa and colleagues. There was also a suggestion from Mr. Harting that we must have a session on issues around local government, as most of the members in most cases having an interest on issues around local government. That point was noted and will be considered for future meetings. Mr. Nodada and Estelle, first set of the minutes, kindly take us through.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson and honorable members, on the screen is the first set of minutes dated 14 May. On the day the committee processed the strategic planning and consideration of the second term program. That's page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. Over to you, Chair.
Colleagues, can I get an indication on whether these are the true reflections of the meeting that took place on the set date? Honorable Ndlovu? Honorable Ndlovu, I see your hand is up. Honorable Siwisa.
Yeah.
I move, Chair.
Thanks,
Honorable
Chair. I move for the adoption of the minutes.
Noted. Honorable Ndlovu moves. Honorable Siwisa seconds.
Second.
Thank you very much. The minutes are duly adopted. Second set of minutes.
Thank you, Chairperson. The second set.
The second set, Mr. Nodada, I don't know if it's on my side or your side. It was a Friday in the Good Hope Center, a joint meeting on both houses, standing and select committees.
I missed that, Chairperson.
I think you had a problem with the network. I was saying, take us through.
Thank you, Chairperson. Page 1. Page 2, attendance. Attendance continues to page 3. Page 4, still attendance, introduction. Page 6, Chair and honorable members. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. Page 13, which is the last page. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Nodada. Colleagues, this is a meeting that was discussing with the minister and the deputy, both the deputy ministers were in the meeting where we were discussing the budget. Can I get an indication from members on whether this is a true reflection of the deliberations that took place on that day?
Chair, I'd like to move for a
Honorable Ryder moves. Honorable Ndlovu. Honorable Ndlovu, your hand is up.
I second, Chair.
Honorable Ndlovu seconds. Minutes are duly adopted. The last set of minutes.
Thank you, honorable members. Thank you, honorable members and chairperson. The last set is dated 27th of May. The committee received a briefing on the day from the Parliamentary Budget Office and the FFC. The briefing was on the 2025 budget. Thank you, Chair. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12, which is the last page. Thank you, Chairperson. Over to you.
Minutes are before you, colleagues, by show of hands. Honorable Majola.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I rise to move the set of minutes. Thank you.
Honorable Majola moves. Any seconder, colleagues?
Second, all Swart.
Honorable Swart seconds. Thank you very much, colleagues. This brings us to the end of set of minutes. Colleagues, just a plea from myself to your good selves and to the support staff also. We have at least 7 meetings remaining before the completion of the process. Some of the meetings will be virtual and some of the meetings will be physical, as we are experiencing a challenge with reserving committee rooms for our meetings. But my request is that all our virtual meetings be at 9 o'clock to allow members to can travel to Parliament after the meeting. If we work around between 9 and 12 o'clock, we have 30 minutes to prepare, finalizing, preparing, and going to the meeting. And then our physical meetings will then be at 10 o'clock. Even when we prepare the support staff, let's make sure that virtual meeting starts at 9 and physical meetings will start at 10. Thank you very much, colleagues. This brings us to the end of our meeting. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.